They say that the human race is doomed, that we have lost touch with our true nature, that the media has corrupted us, and that the planet has no future. I disagree. I believe that humanity is full of hope, and that our salvation lies within each one of us. My name is Brian Rose, and my job is to listen, the oldest method of learning known to man. Each week I seek out individuals that are changing the world, people who are living and thinking in a different way. Their stories will challenge your beliefs, make you question your choices, and perhaps inspire you to change. I never planned on doing any of this, but now I can't stop. Join me on this mission and make humanity something we can all be proud of.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is David ICKE, the English writer and public speaker known since the 1990s as a professional conspiracy theorist, calling yourself a full-time investigator into who and what is really controlling the world. As a former footballer, BBC Sports television presenter, and spokesman for the Green Party, your interview on Terry Wogan's show in '91 turned you from a respected household name into a laughingstock across the country. Now, you're the author of over 20 books and over 10 DVDs, have lectured in over 25 countries, speaking live for up to 10 hours to huge audiences, filling stadiums like Wembley Arena. Your new movie, Renegade, is the first ever feature film about your life and work. David, welcome back to London Real.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Fantastic to have you back. Tell me about this movie. Why now? And what was the purpose of making a movie about your life and your work?
Well, it came out of nowhere. It wasn't that you sat around a table and said we ought to make a movie. I'm just getting on with my life, doing what I normally do. And then this offer came from America to make a movie about my life. And we shot it in about 4 countries. And yeah, it's about my life. But like everything that I do, I want the information out there, the stuff that I've been uncovering and communicating. So the central theme is, yeah, this is David ICKE's life, but it's packed with information that will stimulate a lot of new people, I hope, who watch the movie. Oh, what's all this about? They'll watch a movie, they wouldn't come to a talk or read a book. It will stimulate their interest in actually the world's probably not like we thought it was. You know, it goes into the nature of reality. It goes into the whole, global political, economic conspiracy. And I was very pleased with it. I had nothing to do with the editing of it. I just saw it when it was finished. But it was kind of put together in the end, by people that were quite new to the information. And that was good because it was edited in a way that's very accessible to people who are new to this, as well as people who know all about it. It's also got lots for them as well.
Yeah, I'm really glad you did that, and it shows, because sometimes when people edit their own work, it's like an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And you miss that people don't know the backstory. They're new to these concepts as well. But it feels to me like the world is aching for this information, and they're looking for answers to all these problems in the world. Are you feeling that more than ever?
Oh, big time. You see, I started a world speaking tour, which is kind of ongoing, in 2016, and I did it for a specific reason. That reason. I was looking around and observing people and observing events, and it was very clear that although there was not this vast number of people that were saying, oh, there's a conspiracy or whatever, they were uncomfortable about the world. They were uncomfortable about what was happening. They couldn't articulate why they were uncomfortable, but they didn't like it. They felt uneasy about it. And so I started out on this speaking tour to basically say to those people, this is why you're feeling uneasy, because this is why these events are happening. They're not random, they're happening by actually long planned design. And when people hear another explanation of the world, which instead of presenting the world as a series of random dots, but actually connects them and says that's happening because of that, and that's happening because of that, and that's connected to that, and that's connected to that, and this is where they're all leading us. It's extraordinary to see the lights go on, and people go, and actually this makes far more sense than what I've got from the mainstream media. So it is a time of great challenge, because this thing is moving, not least into the technological level of control. But, there's such a difference between what you see in the mainstream, what you see coming from people who dominate the microphones, and what you get when you talk to people in the general population, that they do not see the life the same way. And so although if you only watch the mainstream media, everything seems so bad, and oh my goodness, look where the world's going, away from the cameras and away from the microphones, there is a vast awakening going on. There absolutely is. Not, that people just awaken to it all, but this awakening of being open to other explanations that they weren't open to before. And I've been a kind of barometer of this, because over the last 30 years, I've seen the whole thing unfold. When I started out, of course, I had mass ridicule, but also mass lack of interest. You talk to a handful of people, you talk in people's front rooms, the interest was that small. But not now. There has been, and it's an unfolding transformation in people's openness to look at life from a different angle. Not least because the more they observe the real world that they're told to believe in, the less sense it makes, the more ridiculous it is. So there has to be other explanations, and people are more open to them. So there is a psychological revolution going on, which is not obvious if you only watch the mainstream media, but it's happening. I've never seen anything like it. And it's not just the numbers, it's the kind of people, system people who not long ago you'd think they'll never look at this. They'll be system thinkers all their lives, and suddenly they're not. Suddenly they are questioning and looking at life from a different angle. So there's much to be positive about, as well as much to be concerned about, because this is moving fast now.
Is that an intuition, something inside of them that just says, wait a second, something's not right here? And does that give you optimism for the human race when you see people showing up?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, something's not right here. It basically sums up what I've been describing. It's they look at the world and they're uneasy about it. There's something not right here. I don't like the way this is going. Because, of course, what they're seeing now more and more is their ability even to express themselves being censored. They're seeing the censorship reaching outrageous levels now. And that will obviously make them feel uneasy. They are experiencing political correctness, which is just a massive form of censorship. Political correctness is very simple. It's manipulating the target population to silence itself. And so you've got, again, this people on the microphones and the general population chasm of difference can be seen with political correctness. You listen to the microphone people in the mainstream, and political correctness is a good thing. Oh yes, you can't say this, you can't say that. Oh no, that'd be outrageous to say that. You talk to the general population, they're going, this is mad, this is crazy. I tell you what, I saw a video yesterday, actually, I put on my website, which kind of captured this. This guy in America, he's looked at the fact that they're now having, there's only one word for it, segregation between blacks and whites, in reverse, as it was before. It was outrageous before, and reverse discrimination is equally outrageous. Racism is racism. It doesn't matter what race it is, it's racism. But anyway, and they're having segregated graduation ceremonies, segregated housing on campus. So he goes onto campus and he interviews white students. And he asked them what they think about it. And they say, oh, it's a good thing. Oh, it's absolutely right. Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, we should have that. Then he goes out in the general population and he interviews black members of the public and asks them the same question. What do you think about this segregation? And they're going, well, it's segregation, isn't it? It's what we had. We don't want that. It's ridiculous. So you had this situation where the political correct mindset on campus was saying segregation is okay. I don't think it is, whatever form it takes. And the people that's supposed to be benefiting from the segregation in the general population saying, well, this is crazy. Because there is this massive, it is a chasm that's opened up between what is termed the progressive mindset. I think it's anything but progressive. I think it's regressive, which is obsessed with political correctness and self-identity and identity politics. And the general population of all colours and creeds who are looking on, who don't have the microphones and don't get in front of the cameras except rarely, going, this is crazy, man. This is what's happening. What do you mean you can't say this, you can't say that? That's crazy. And it's that group of people, the great majority among the public, who are open now to looking at the world in a different way, because they're open to explanations of why the world is becoming so utterly insane.
And why did it become that way? How come we've come into this politically correct society? And why is everybody very busy being offended all the time?
Right. We've got 5 hours, have we? Right. Because there is a process here. When you sweep away the layers of propaganda and the way things are presented, you start to see the connections and you start to see where it's going. I have this phrase that I use in the talks and one or two of the books. Know the outcome and you'll see the journey. What I mean by that is, if you don't know the outcome, where the world is being taken and why, but certainly where, then daily events appear to be random. This event happens, that event happens, that event happens, and there appears to be no pattern to them because, well, they're just random events, they've just happened. But when you know what the outcome is designed to be, the random events now take on a very different interpretation. Because now you see that these apparently random events are stepping stones to that outcome. So what is the outcome in terms of political correctness and censorship? The plan is that eventually no one will see or hear anything that the authorities don't want you to see and hear. That's the outcome they're going towards. And so the censorship is squeezing and squeezing and squeezing free thought, free opinion, free speech. You're seeing it all the time. And one of the most important things, and this was all planned, I'll talk about all this forever as well, was to move where people get their information from away from newspapers and traditional media onto the internet. And now people get the vast majority of their information from the internet. Now,
which is independent.
Yeah, of course it is. And the key reason for that is, once it's on the internet, algorithms can start dictating what you see and hear. You know, they can't in a newspaper. You know, there's censorship in newspapers, of course, but at least it's there to be seen and debated. You know, why is this not in the paper? But what we're getting now is algorithms that are censoring what can be seen and heard, even once the codes are in, without human input. So,
okay, but those same algorithms at YouTube make you one of our more popular guests and put these ideas out there. Is that a loop they haven't closed yet?
Yeah, but they're closing it. I mean, you know,
a lot of free speech.
A lot of my videos are being taken down, and it's you're subject to this thing called shadow banning, where you post something, but it's not seen by anything like the number of people who would normally see it. Right. So all this is moving towards that point they're aiming for, where you don't see anything or hear anything that the authorities have not basically approved. And this is where political correctness and the destruction of free speech comes in. It's all part of the same thing. What you've got with political correctness is the population being manipulated to silence itself. So the more and more people they can persuade and encourage to be upset and offended and have a sense of victimhood, the more excuses they have to say, no, we're stopping that because it's offending people. That's offensive. You watch, the censorship has expanded in the same speed on this part of the censorship as people being offended has expanded, because they have more and more excuses to censor because you mustn't offend anybody.
And there is a rapid growth in people being offended, right?
Absolutely. And because the more people that are offended, the more excuses you have to censor because they're offended. And then you come to freedom of speech, which political correctness is all part of the process of destroying. What is free speech? It's the freedom to speak, stating the obvious, but sometimes you have to. Freedom to speak means freedom to say things the authorities don't want people to hear and see. So while free speech exists, this end goal of people only seeing and hearing what the authorities approve is impossible, because freedom of speech will always stop it happening. So this is why free speech is being targeted so fiercely, because until that's gone, they can't reach their goal. And if you look at the world and current events, just from this one perspective, that's the goal of complete control of information, then the stepping stones towards that can be very clearly seen in the vastly increasing levels of censorship. And
is it happening faster than you thought it would? Because there seems to be a massive acceleration in the last 2 years with offense culture, people getting deplatformed, outrage upon outrage. People forgot the latest outrage. It's a bit faster than even you expected.
Yeah, well, I'm going to throw a word in here now. Trump. You know, why was Trump elected? It should have been impossible. And I know great chunks of the alternative media in America supported Trump because he was telling them what they wanted to hear, which is the biggest thing to watch. Because people who want your support aren't going to tell you what you don't want to hear, are they? And so he articulated what they wanted to hear. And having talked and written for years, the alternative media saying it doesn't matter who you vote for, the same people are controlled by the same people. Suddenly, all that was forgotten because, no, Trump's different. He's not. So this whole conspiracy to enslave humanity is a psychological game. What is it now, 7.7 billion or something people in the world? The number of people who are in full knowledge behind this manipulation, this agenda for this global Orwellian state is tiny.
How tiny?
Well, I mean, in the end, if you got to the real core, you could get them in one room. That's how tiny, but then it goes out from that.
20, 30, 40, 50 people.
Yeah, and then it goes out from that, and as you go out, you know, you're meeting people who, the further you go out, know less and less and less about what they're actually serving.
So the technology CEOs of Facebook, Twitter, and Google don't necessarily know the grand plan, but they're close enough to the center.
The idea that Mark Zuckerberg runs Facebook is a joke. I mean, have you seen those staring eyes in absolute terror and that bewildered face when he's being questioned on Capitol Hill? I mean, the idea he's running a company like Facebook is ridiculous. Obviously, you know, there are other forces involved here, and that's where you get your coordination from. That's why Amazon and Facebook and Google and Twitter are all, and Apple are all censoring in unison, because it's coordinated towards this goal of complete control of information. And so what you're seeing is free speech being targeted with more and more excuses to reach this situation of complete control. And this is really, really important, because the next stage to look at is this. Where does human behavior come from? It comes from human perception. If I have a certain perception of an event or a situation, I'll behave towards it in a certain way. If I have a different perception of that situation, I'll behave towards it in a different way. So from perception comes behavior. Where does perception come from? It comes from information received. Whether it's personal experience, which is a form of information, whether it's a newspaper, Facebook post, or whatever, it's information received. Now, if you go deep in the shadows, beyond the politicians, you reach that level of this web where they understand, A, how reality works, they just don't want us to know, and B, how the mind works, how psychology works. And what we're looking at, because it's a few manipulating so many, the only way that you can achieve that is by controlling the perceptions of the many, and by dividing and ruling the many as well. But you've got to control the perceptions of the many. And to do that, you control information. And what this process of the internet and these internet giants, near monopolies, that process can be simply explained. And it can be explained why, up to relatively recently, the internet was censorship free. My God, not anymore. And why your Facebooks and your Googles and Twitters and stuff and Amazons were censorship free, and now suddenly they aren't. This is the process towards that goal of complete control of information, thus complete control of human perception, thus control of human behavior. This is the process. The internet was created originally by an organization called DARPA. DARPA is the technological development arm of the Pentagon. I would call DARPA evil, except it might sue me for defamation, or evil might sue me for defamation of character. It's a sinister organization for which we can thank for death rays and endless new ways of killing people in larger and larger numbers without damaging the furniture. Nice people. And they created the internet. Now, if they created the internet, it ain't good for humanity. Although it could be, and it has been. But ultimately, that's not the plan, or they would not have created it with military technology.
The internet has helped your message, and it has helped people
Absolutely.
come to your and awaken.
Yes, I'm going to go through that sequence now, how that came about. Now, the idea, and this is all connected to the smart technology and all the technologies that are coming in, and artificial intelligence. They had to get the internet to a point where it was the central pillar of human society, the central pillar of where all our information came from, the central pillar of control. This is why we now have the Internet of Things, where billions of pieces of technology, everything from your fridge to your car to your telly, are connected to the internet. But to reach that point, it had to be what people wanted. If they'd have introduced a censored internet from the start, the internet wouldn't be now what it has become.
So they Trojan horsed it in.
They Trojan horsed it in, a very good phrase. So what they did was have a uncensored internet, and people going, "This is great, this is fantastic," and it became the center pillar of human society. And of course, in that initial period where they were selling it, people like me and so many other people had the platform uncensored to get information out there, and it was great. And I'm sure your DARPAs and all the connected organizations to DARPA were kind of spitting through their teeth, but they had to do it to get the internet to where they wanted. In the same way, when your Facebook started and your Googles and your Twitters and your Amazons with the books, they would not have reached this point they've reached of near monopoly if they'd have been censoring as they are now from the start. Instead, they did exactly the same thing. no censorship, say what you like, and people then became addicted to Facebook, and Google became by far the biggest search engine. Amazon has basically destroyed the independent book industry worldwide as it existed before. And so they reached this point of monopoly. And then came the point where, yes, the internet is the central pillar of human society, and it's now irreversible. And yes, these are near monopolies. And who you're going to go to if not them? Who are you going to go to get any numbers watching your videos, if not YouTube, owned by Google, of course, or Alphabet, its parent company? So now we're in a position of power and strength. Now the internet's going to become what it was always planned to be. Now Facebook and Google and Twitter and Amazon are now going to be what they were always planned to be, which were gatekeepers on the information that people can see and hear. And because of that, human perception is increasingly being given a narrower and narrower band of information from which to form those perceptions. So perceptions are being manipulated. And I have a kind of very simple rule of thumb. When people say to me, well, what are the areas that are of the agenda? And I say, look at anything you cannot have an alternative opinion about. Look at any subject where to say something different from the official narrative, you're going to get abuse, you're going to get called a Nazi, an ist of some kind, and you're basically going to get shut down. They are the key areas of the agenda, or many key areas of the agenda. And see, this is the whole point. If I want you to believe something, or I want the public to believe something, and I know that what I'm saying is so utterly flawed in my justification of it, that if there was an open debate where all opinions, facts, and evidence could be freely available and discussed, I'm going to lose the debate. So what I want to happen is not going to happen because I'll lose the debate, because I won't be able to justify it in an open debate. What do? You don't have the debate. You shut it down. So
this is you making obvious that no one wants to debate you.
Yeah.
And they call you the ists.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's what they do call you. Australia banned you recently,
Yep.
said you were an anti-Semitist.
Yes, I know.
You've been called a racist.
Yeah.
How do you respond to these things, and why do they say these things, Dave?
Well, one of the, or two other reasons I was banned from Australia, having been given a visa last September, one minister, the immigration minister, overrode his own department 4 hours before my plane left in February to the ban. Two other things were my views on vaccines and my views on human-caused global warming. And that was a massive wake-up call for a lot of people in Australia.
They cited those as the reasons you were banned.
Yeah.
In addition.
That was a big wake-up call. Just before we go to the
Did that surprise you that you got banned 4 hours before you took a flight down there?
Not really, because I'd got the gist some weeks before that there was a campaign, basically by one person, to stop me speaking in Australia. The same person is now trying to get a Palestinian poet banned. You know, poets are dangerous, aren't they?
Is this political correctness?
Well, it's political correctness. But it's more than that. But just on that thing about, say, vaccines, what the Australian government is saying, and if you look at the vaccine thing, YouTube has now demonetized anti-vaccination videos. That's always a prelude to outright banning. Amazon started banning anti-vaccine books and videos as well.
Netflix banned an anti-vaccine movie.
Yeah. Now, we just come back to what I just said. If you can't win the debate, don't have it. Shut down that which is challenging your position. So here we have a situation in Australia where the pharmaceutical cartel, which makes billions out of vaccinations can say what the hell they like, basically, to get people to vaccinate the kids and vaccinate themselves. They can advertise their wares on national television. I mean, American mainstream media television won't exist without the drug adverts. But one guy, coming in to do a few talks in Australian cities, having a different version of that, has to be banned. Now, that is insane when you look at it. There was a lady called Sherry Tenpenny. She's a doctor in America who's anti-vaccine. She was banned from Australia for her views on vaccinations. So they know they can't win the debate to the extent that they're terrified of a bloke from the Isle of Wight going there for 3 weeks, talking a bit and leaving, when what is pressing the version that they want people to believe is unlimited. I mean, how incredible is that in terms of not being confident you can win the debate? They shouldn't be worried about me, but they are, because what they're claiming is unsupportable if you have a proper debate on it. And of course, I am called anti-Semitic which is a misnomer, by the way. It means anti-Arab, in fact, anti-Semitic, because Semite is basically a term for a group of languages in the Middle East, the overwhelmingly vast majority of which are Arabic languages. So even the term anti-Semitic is a misnomer, but because they want to silence me. And we can get into some interesting areas here, not least in what's been happening to the British Labour Party.
Right, we should talk about that. The Guardian did a quick description and said you claim that the Jewish people bankrolled Hitler, caused the 2008 global financial crisis, and staged the 9/11 terrorism attacks. That's why some of the reasons they call you an anti-Semite.
Yeah. I say the Jewish people. No, I don't. The Jewish people are a whole community, a whole vast spectrum of belief and perception. But what happens is this. There has been created what I call the anti-Semitism industry, which is a protection racket. And it's not a protection for Jewish people. It's a protection racket to protect the far-right government in Israel from legitimate criticism. And you can see very clearly that it's not about protecting Jewish people, because any Jewish person that criticizes Israel gets the abuse to a greater extent than non-Jewish people do. We've had a situation in recent times when Jewish people have been expelled from the Labour Party for being anti-Semitic. I mean, it's like it's at the level of saying men and women are not biologically different. It's madness, because it's not to do with protecting Jewish people, clearly not. It's to do with protecting Israel from legitimate criticism. So this is how they work. And you're talking a tiny number of people in the Jewish community, what I call ultra-Zionists, the real extremists. The rest of the community are not involved in this at all. That's why when he says, they say he's saying the Jewish people, I'm not saying the Jewish people at all.
So you're criticizing the ultra-Zionists.
The ultra-Zionists,
right,
who have no desire to help Jewish people. They have a desire to help an agenda.
Which include the Rothschild family?
Oh yeah,
okay.
all that stuff.
Okay.
So, and people like George Soros, for instance. George Soros is a multi-billionaire financier who has a network called the Open Society Foundations that operate in more than 100 countries and are basically driving this progressive, regressive, political correct agenda and all that goes with it. And yet, and leaked documents, leaked emails have all shown this to be provable fact in countries like Ukraine and many others. But if you as I do, expose George Soros for what he's doing. Do you know he has put so far $32 billion into this Open Society Foundation network? I mean, why is he doing that when you see how it works and what it's doing and what its goals are through what they call NGOs and stuff? So you expose what he's doing, not because he's Jewish, but because of what he's doing. What's the defense mechanism? You're only saying that because he's Jewish. No, I'm saying it because of what he's doing. I don't care if he's outer Mongolian. I don't care if he's middle class American or middle class whatever. I'm interested in what he's doing. But the protection racket, because that's what it is, then kicks in and says, you're only saying it because he's Jewish. You can't say that, that's anti-Semitic. And this is how the protection racket works. So,
and this is happening in the Labour Party now as well.
Well, I mean, this was the situation. This protection racket had got such influence in the Liberal Democrats and in the Conservative Party, as it has in the Democrats and the Republicans in America, big time. Some people are now starting to point that out in America and getting massive flack for it. And most of the Labour Party was there too. The Blairite Labour Party, it won't have a word said against Israel, no matter how extreme its behaviour is towards Palestinians and what have you. But there was a core around Jeremy Corbyn, and that which supported Jeremy Corbyn, that was still willing to criticise Israel. And so the focus was turned on that. And you had this anti-Semitic hysteria, which was generated, the media supported it, but it was generated by groups that are part of this protection racket. And they were targeting people for saying the mildest stuff. And they introduced this new definition of anti-Semitism, which was classic protection racket. Let's put aside the fact that anti-Semitism is a misnomer term and look at a definition of it, a fair definition of it. It's hating or being discriminatory against Jewish people for being Jewish.
Right, which does happen today.
Of course it does. Not on the scale that's claimed, but it absolutely does. And it's reprehensible. Discriminating against anyone on the basis of that background, race, religion, whatever, is the same. But that simple definition didn't serve the protection racket. Why? Because it allowed the criticism of Israel and the extremes of ultra-Zionism. So they introduce a new one. And this new one is frankly ridiculous. And I'm not going to, bow down and say, oh, I mustn't say that. What will they say about me? I don't care what they say about me. It's ridiculous. And when you read it, what it's saying is basically, whatever they claim, this is what it's saying. Any criticism of someone who happens to be Jewish, for almost any reason, is anti-Semitic. Criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. Criticism of Zionism is anti-Semitic. You've had Emmanuel Macron coming out recently and saying criticism of Zionism is anti-Semitic. Zionism's a political philosophy. It's not anti-British to criticise the Conservative Party or the Labour Party, but what they've done is, and this is not Jewish people, this is the protection racket, which is a tiny number of very well-funded organisations, is they've expanded the definition to stop criticism of Israel. Now, what they wanted to do was to have the Labour Party accept this definition. And so they started the campaign of abuse against the Labour Party. Everything was anti-Semitic. Oh, they said they're anti-Semitic.
Completely unjustified, this campaign?
Well, in any group, you'll have some people who are discriminatory against this group or that group. Of course you will. But in terms of the scale they were claiming, it's insane. So what they forced, the Labour Party got down on its knees eventually because its backbone went. And they've accepted this definition. So the abuse has got what they want. And now they're expelling people from the Labour Party, including Jewish people, on the basis of this new definition. I mean, how crazy is this? Where you get somebody, this is one example, who was born in Israel, Jewish, serves in the Israeli Defense Forces, took part, I think, in the 1982 war against war with Lebanon, and as a conscript, then stayed on and served in, I think it was PR for the Israeli Defense Forces, saw some of the extraordinarily horrific things that are done to Palestinians, and reevaluated his whole way of looking at what was going on, moved to Britain, and then thought, okay, well, what political party can I join where I can express my, what I feel about what's going on? He joined the Labour Party. That man's been expelled for anti-Semitism.
Okay, so right? This is all the political correctness gone too far. It's a blanket, it's protectionism, and it's getting us to react.
It's the protection racket. Now, if you go back to my ban in Australia, it was basically achieved by one man called Abramovich, who runs a man and a dog organization, well funded, but a man and a dog organization called the Anti-Defamation Commission. And these organizations, like the Anti-Defamation League in America, are inversions in this sense that they call themselves anti-defamation, but their modus operandi is to defame their targets. They call themselves anti-hate organizations, but their modus operandi is to get the public to hate their targets, right, and demonize them. It's all an inverted racket. And that one guy basically got the immigration minister to ban me 4 hours before my plane left. Now, the Jewish population of Australia is 0.4%. The amount of that population represented by the Anti-Defamation Commission of this guy Abramovich is probably 0.4% of 0.4%. And there are 25 million people in Australia, and that one guy has used that influence to dictate what 25 million people can or cannot choose to hear. And that's the situation we face now, where the tail's not wagging the dog anymore. It's wagging the flipping elephant. In the terms of how few people are dictating what people can see and hear. You look at the number of people that run Facebook at the core of making the decisions, or Google, or Twitter, or Amazon. And that few people are now dictating what the entirety of the planet, in so many ways, can see or hear. And it needs to be called out, and we have to stop being intimidated into silence, because the most insidious censorship is self-censorship. It's when you don't say anything and you have it debated, or you even get abuse for it, you just don't say it. And there are so many people out there, and they'll be watching this program and they'll say, yeah, I know what he's talking about, who are silencing themselves out of fear of the consequences of having their own opinion. And there are people now, almost the entirety of the Labour Party, for instance, who are not any longer criticizing the extremes of the Israeli government because they don't want to be expelled from the Labour Party. And this is how this whole thing's working. It's working through direct censorship, algorithmic censorship, and overwhelming through self-censorship. I better not say that all. And what I am really, I'm the little kid as the emperor comes along with no clothes on, and all the people are kind of fussing around him, saying, "Oh, nice coat, emperor! Oh, what a nice pair of trousers!" And I'm going, "Hold on, what are we talking about? He's bloody naked. He's got no clothes on. Look at it." And that today, as Orwell predicted, is a revolutionary act. It's a revolutionary act to point out the bloody obvious. And of course, they don't want the obvious pointed out, because when it's pointed out, they're in a situation again where they can't win the debate. So they shut people up, and I will not be shut up. Yes, they'll silence me. They can ban me from Australia. They ain't going to stop me saying what I believe is right, because it's over then. It's over. This point of, which is the goal of no one can see or hear anything the authorities don't approve, comes about because people are intimidated into silence. You can't silence 7.7 billion people, or however many it is. They have to silence themselves. And you do that by frightening them and intimidating them into censoring and silencing themselves. And that's what's happening.
Well, it starts in Australia. Will this continue with other countries?
Well,
or will the Australians wake up and say, hold on a second, we need ICKE in this country. We're going to make a protest. You example the poll tax that Thatcher tried to pull in the 80s here in the UK, and people weren't having it. They went to the streets and defeated it and ended up with her downfall. But there still has to be a popular movement for this to happen, right?
Yeah.
Or you will be systematically banned in countries and platforms.
Yeah.
And in 5 years from now, it'll be more difficult for you.
Yeah. But you know, there has been a reaction in Australia. There's a petition that's closing in on 20,000 now, people demanding basically that I be allowed in. But what was interesting about Australia is that the Liberal Party, which is the government that made the decision, which is basically our Conservative Party, like the Republicans in America, and the Labour Party were both united that I should be banned, you know, because we live in one-party states now. And what I had in some talks I did last year is, this is the irony. I mean, the ironies are endless, you know. But if I wrote a book entitled Irony, it would never end. Whereby the Labour Party have been systematically targeted for being anti-Semitic. Therefore, they've conceded and conceded and conceded until basically they don't criticise Israel anymore. And there were Labour Party members from Momentum, not many, I have to say, but there were some, who were protesting outside my meetings because I'm anti-Semitic. It's just insane. They don't have the nous and self-awareness to see that the scam that's being played on the Labour Party is the same scam being played on me. Now, we talked last time, and it's worth reiterating. My philosophy on life, whether people agree with it or not, it's not the point, is that we are, if you want to go to the true I, the eternal I, we are simply consciousness. We are states of awareness, no form. We are states of awareness, states of being aware. And we experience this reality through these, what I call biological computers, these bodies, which allows us to experience a certain band of frequency that we call the world. And I'm always talking about the illusion of the label. The world is in so many ways controlled and psychologically controlled by manipulating people, not least through the lack of information about reality, into self-identifying with labels. I am this race, I am this religion, I am this sex, etc. I am this income bracket. And people self-identify with those labels. If you say to people, say to a guy, I don't know, who are you? They won't say I'm a state of awareness having an experience. They'll say, oh, I'm Bill, I come from Blackburn, and I drive a bus. That's their self-identity. No, those labels are not who you are, they are your experiences. So when someone says, I am a Muslim, well, no, that's your experience. I mean, do you think when you leave the body, you're still a Muslim? Do you think before you came in here, you were a Muslim? I mean, these religions and these constructs and these labels are a feature of this frequency band we call the world. You come in, you pick up labels, not least through where you're born. If you're born into a Muslim family, you're almost certainly going to be a Muslim. If If you're born into a Christian family in the southern states of America, you're almost certainly going to be a Christian. You're born into a Jewish family, you're almost certainly going to be follow Judaism or whatever. So the labels are not even decided upon often, they're just inherited through where you're born. So these labels are transitory experiences, incredibly transitory experiences. So whatever people agree with that or not, and I talk about it in detail in the books, that's my philosophy on life. It's the ultimate non-racist philosophy. Because I'm saying all these labels are irrelevant. You're a different color to me. It's just a different version of a biological computer. You know, if we were on the moon, the two spacemen on the moon, would we be fighting over where our spacesuits were made and what color they were? Of course not. We think that was crazy. Hey, Houston, we've got a problem. But because of this illusion of reality that we experience and believe in, and the labels we believe in and self-identify with, we have all this divide and rule, which is the essential component of a few controlling the many, based on labels. So let's take the Australia example. This is how crazy it gets, man. My philosophy is the ultimate non-racist, non-label philosophy. I don't judge people by labels because I know it's a transitory experience. I know that the person that calls himself this, that, or the other is a point of attention within the same infinite awareness that I am. We're all expressions of each other. So that's my philosophy. And I get banned from Australia on basically the say-so of one man, this guy Abramovich, who is utterly and totally self-identifying with his label. The fact that he is Jewish dictates and colors his every perception, his every action, his every point of observing everything. Whereas I'm saying, look, mate, chill. It's just an experience for a 70 years and 10. Your consciousness, having the experience, the same consciousness that I am. And yet I am the racist and he is the anti-racist. I'm saying in my talks, we need to love each other. Because the fact that we've stopped doing it on a large scale, and we are now having these fault lines of hate and abuse created to divide us, is what's allowing the imprisonment, the enslavement to happen. And he is a guy who claims to be anti-hate, who's saying, hate that Ike. We mustn't have him in. You've got to hate him. If you hate him, you'll support not having him in. It's a complete inversion of reality.
Well, why do people miss that point that you're always making, which is we need to love each other and we're infinite consciousness? Because so many people do. They call you these ists and these...
Yeah.
But they miss that point. How come they don't see that when they see your stuff?
Well, if I have an agenda and you are someone I want to silence or someone I want to demonize, I'm either unconsciously only going to hear what you say that fits the fact that I want to demonize you, or I'm going to be aware that that's what I'm doing, and I'm only going to pick out the bits that I think I can use. I'll give you an example. I've written now 20-odd books, and I've been writing them since about 1993. When they try to demonize me, they pick out a short section, terribly short section, from a book that I wrote in 1994 called How the Truth Shall Set You Free. And they never mention all the books that I've written since. They mention just that one in 1994 I wrote. It came out in 95, where I say that there was a kind of breathtakingly large ratio of Jewish people among those that were involved in the Russian Revolution. Now, that's not a supposition, that's provable fact. Books have been written based on the original documents of the time that have shown this to be true. But what you're not saying that all Jews were responsible for the Russian Revolution. You're just saying, actually, if you look at the facts and the original documents, there was a very high ratio. Why was that? That's interesting. This is what open discourse, debate, and questioning is all about. Anyway, I wrote that in 1994. And they're still using it to get me banned from Australia, because they can't find anything else. And this is the irony. Since I wrote that book, I've been to Australia 10 times speaking, and no one's ever brought anything up. But this time, they suddenly have. Why? Because I'm starting to have a greater and greater effect on encouraging people, shall we say, to look at the world in a different way and to start asking questions that haven't been asked before. And I'm becoming more and more, from their point of view, dangerous to their agenda, because I'm exposing it. I'm pointing out that these aren't random events. This is part of a process, a script, an agenda. They don't want that. So if they don't want to debate me on that, because they can't win it. So what they do is they try to demonize you, picking out this bit and that bit and that bit, and try to silence you that way. And another irony, God, the book's getting longer, was that 2 hours before the immigration minister in Australia, a guy called David Coleman, sent us this document revoking my visa, while me and my son Jamie are sitting in a hotel bar waiting to get the bus to the airport. 2 hours before that, I was being interviewed by an Australian Jewish journalist, and she was laughing at the fact that I was being called anti-Semitic, because she'd done a very revolutionary thing. Eve Fisher, her name is, very, very intelligent woman. She'd done a very, very revolutionary thing. She'd read my books. And she knew what was being said about me was a nonsense. But of course, most people haven't read my books if you take the totality of the population. And so when these, what they are is ultra-Zionist hate groups, they're trying to get their targets hated while claiming to be anti-hate. They say, they're saying, he's saying this, he's saying that, he's saying the other. They don't know if I'm or not.
Right.
Right? So basically, it's throw as much mud as you can, and you know some will stick. But they have a problem with me. They have a problem with me because I'm not some, far right, it's the Jews person. And also, my philosophy is absolutely the opposite of racism. I think racism is childlike. I think sexism is childlike, because you are basically discriminating against a transitory label, which is basically someone's experience. So you'll never find someone less sexist, less racist than me, because I think it's all nonsense.
Understood.
But if you want to demonize someone, then, and what they're saying will not allow them to be demonized, then make it up. And enough people will believe it because they have no other point of reference, because they won't have read my books and actually seen what I'm saying, which is nice sitting here to actually have the opportunity to say this. And so if you want to pull all this together, because it's all the same thing in the end, look at the transgender situation. We live in a world now where everything has to be black and white. You're for us or you're against us. You're good or you're bad. You're black or you're white. When everything is a shade of grey. Everything, the truth is always somewhere in between the polarities. So if you look at the transgender thing, again, it comes under this heading of, if it's the agenda, you won't have the right for another opinion. Because if you're trying to sell the idea that there is no biological difference between men and women, well, you're on a loser, because you can't win that debate. But if you silence the opposition and you intimidate them into silence, through abuse and all the rest of it that comes from that, then you don't have to win the debate. Of course, there is no debate, and your view will prevail, and we're seeing it prevail all the time. Now, this is the difference. If people feel that they're in the wrong body, that's none of my business. It's their business. And if they want to self-identify as a sex different to their body, good luck to you, mate. It's your right to do that, and B, it's none of my business. But that's not what it's about. That's the foot in the door. The foot in the door says we must not discriminate against transgender people. Okay, my hands go up. Absolutely agree with you. We shouldn't we discriminate against anybody? But that's when it starts, and then it starts to move. And now suddenly you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't have this opinion, you can't have that opinion. If you're a parent and you don't like what's being taught to your kids at school, then you're a bigot, and you are anti, you're a transphobic, and the whole thing expands from the initial we mustn't discriminate against transgender people. And now we have this situation now where if you argue against toilets for boys, girls or anybody in a school, where the girls at the school are kind of intimidated and don't like it, well, you're kind of transphobic. Now, this is what happens when the agenda kicks in. And we won't have time to go into it now, but I go into it in the books, particularly my last book, about what this transgender agenda is really about. And it's absolutely nothing to do with stopping discrimination against transgender people. Nothing. There's a much longer goal.
Is any of this about that stuff, or is it just about the control and the ultimate limiting of information? And is it all about the same goal?
It's all about the same goal. But you know, if we have the time to go into the whole the technology agenda and the AI agenda, then maybe I could bring it in there. But the point being that when it's the agenda, everything gets ridden over roughshod. I'll give you an example. There was the feminist movement, and the feminist movement wanted more equality for women. Okay, my hands go up again. And not discriminating against women, my hands go up again. Yeah, I'm all with you. I think that has now gone the other way, where there's discrimination against men. I mean, we've gone past the balance point. But anyway, so feminism was, if you like, the politically correct subject of the time. But now this other agenda's coming in, which is the transgender agenda, which is now usurping the feminist agenda. It means that if you're a feminist, this is now, you can see it widely, if you're a feminist and you don't, for instance, think that women's sport should be destroyed as a competition, and it is being increasingly, by people with male bodies that identify as women taking part in women's sport. I mean, who do they think is going to win the weightlifting? If women, as we've seen with people like Martina Navratilova, the tennis player, and others, if you then, as someone representing women, say this is destroying our sport, you are now a transphobic. You are now this and anist and whatever, because you're getting in the way of the agenda. It's nothing to do with what's right and what's fair and how it's affecting women and women's sport. It's nothing to do with young girls at school that feel uncomfortable with being in toilets with boys. Nothing to do with, for instance, some examples I put in my last book, in a hostel for women suffering domestic violence, are told that they have to share a room with a man because the man self-identifies with being a woman. And if they don't like it, well, they can leave. This is not about fairness. It's not about justice. It's not about inclusion, it's about exclusion on behalf of basically an agenda. We're going to make this happen, and although, we were supporting you before because that was the agenda then, you've been overridden by another area of the agenda now, so we're going to ride over you as well.
Okay, so it's another tool created to divide us, is what you're saying.
To divide us, and it's also deeper than that. And again, what happens is when you create manufactured discrimination, what gets lost? Real discrimination. Real discrimination against Jewish people. Real discrimination against transgender people, real discrimination against people on the grounds of colour. That gets lost in the great tidal wave of manufactured discrimination.
Okay, which is also all happening online and on social platforms.
Because if you can persuade people they're discriminated against and they are victimized, you can get them into a situation where they feel offended by more and more things. You've got more and more excuses to censor. Everything is connected. It's a web where everything cause and affects everything else.
Okay, let's talk about censorship. Alex Jones was recently deplatformed off pretty much everything in America. Yeah. What did you think of that?
Well, I think of that as I would think about anyone being deplatformed in the same way. It's outrageous. There's many things that Alex Jones says that I don't agree with, many things that I do, but many things I don't agree with. I didn't agree, for instance, with his support of Trump. I thought he was completely misguided on that by believing that Trump was different. He's not. We're seeing that. If you are different, you don't make John Bolton your national security advisor and let him run foreign policy in the way that was run over previous administrations. So, but the point is, it's not about whether you agree with someone or not, about everything. It's their right to say it. Because what is freedom of speech? Again, it's the freedom to speak. If anyone at all does not have that freedom, there is no freedom of speech for anybody. There's only the freedom to conform within the parameters of what is considered to be allowable freedom of speech.
But are there limits? I mean, Holocaust deniers yelling fire in a crowded theater, are there limits?
Well, this is an interesting point, which I do talk about. The limit, or the question, is where the limit is applied. This is my philosophy. People should be allowed to say whatever they like. If they are doing the things that you talk about, there are laws against that. There are laws against doing that. There's laws against incitement to violence, laws against incitement to burn someone's houses down. But those laws are applied after the point of delivery. And once that is dealt with after the point of delivery, there is no way that any authority can dictate what people see and hear, because it's all after the point of delivery. Once you start censoring before the point of delivery, through self-censorship, through algorithmic censorship, and through laws of various kinds, you are now entering very dangerous ground within which authorities now have the power to decide what people see and hear. And of course that power is abused because they get more and more reasons to censor more and more things before the point of delivery. So you can start out by saying we must stop people kind of recruiting for terrorism, okay? But again, you can deal with that after the point of delivery. And do you want to know where the people recruiting terrorists are or not? But that's not where it stops. Then you go, fake news. People putting out fake news. We must stop fake news. We must stop fake news being posted. Well, the BBC would be finished for a start, and CNN if you ban fake news. But there's another excuse. And then there's political correctness of various kinds. Oh yeah, we must stop that. And then, well, we must stop basically anything that upsets anybody. And then somebody goes crazy in New Zealand, and so you say, okay, we must stop anybody posting anything about white nationalism or whatever. And so what you're doing is you're creating a situation, once you cross that line of being able to censor before the point of delivery, of censoring more and more and more and more things before anyone hears them.
Okay.
Where is that taking us? That's taking us to that point, which is the goal, where no one sees or hears anything that the authorities don't want you to see and hear.
I think Alex got in trouble with the Sandy Hook victims because they were actually suing him for some of the libelous stuff, and they were getting backlash. And I think that was one of the straws.
But libel laws are after the point of delivery. And I have no problem with, laws dealing with incitements to violence and all that. But it's after the point of delivery. This is such a key point. Because once you go beyond that and you allow censorship before the point of delivery, well, now you're in a very dangerous ground. And that's where we are, and that's where we're moving.
Right.
What are algorithms in there for? They are specifically there to censor before the point of delivery.
Or provide the most popular stuff to the people who want it.
Yeah, but I mean, things can be used for many different reasons. And I'm obviously always looking at the cabal reason for them, because if you're going to sell something, then there has to be apparently positive things to it, so you can sell the thing to use it in a negative way.
Have you ever been sued?
Once for saying something that was true. This is an interesting thing. This is years ago. This was just a guy you never have heard of in Canada, and it was a lawsuit specifically to try to silence me. It wasn't on the basis of what I was saying wasn't true, and I was going to take this on in court because it was not libelous, and I was told before it was getting close to the court case, and I was told by someone in the Canadian legal system who would have known. He said to me, settle. He says, because you can't win, because they're not going to let you win. There's no way they are going to let you win this case. It's rigged. And if you go ahead with it, you're going to lose. But that's the only time.
That's surprising.
Yeah, that's the only time, yeah. And this was a nondescript guy who was not one of the major players, who was simply doing it. They call it lawfare. That's what they call it. They've got a name for it.
Okay.
Lawfare, where you attack someone legally when you have, shall we say, the resources to do it, to try to silence them.
Are you worried about being deplatformed? Is it only a matter of time, and will that make it harder for you to spread your message, like Alex Jones was?
Well, obviously, it would make it harder, because when you're trying to communicate to people, you need vehicles of communication, and for reasons that are now clear to many people, this cabal controls the sources of communication.
Can we define
mass
this
communication.
cabal a little bit for anybody new? Because I know you've talked about this before.
Well, if you could imagine a spider's web, and in the center of the web you've got the spider, and the spider is where it's coming from, and this is a tiny, tiny group of people who understand how reality works, they understand how psychology works, and how to manipulate perception. The strands in the web closest to the spider are the most exclusive secret societies. Many of them don't even have names because they're harder then to track down. And in those secret societies, you have those people that know the big agenda, that interact with the spider, if you like. And then you come out from the spider, and you're still in the hidden, And then you hit the secret societies we do know about, the inner circles of the Freemasons, the Knights Templar, the Knights of Malta, the inner core of the Jesuit order, and so on. And then, as you come out, you meet a point in the web where the hidden meets the seen. And there you have what I call cusp organizations. These are things like the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations in America, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, which was specifically set up in the 1960s to use the environment as an excuse to change human society, which is what this whole climate change stuff is all about. And then through these organizations and many others, the diktat of the spider coming out through the web goes out into the world of the seen. And it goes out and plays out as legislation and changes in society, plays out through governments, government agencies, the banking system, major corporations, media owners, etc. And at the point where it changes human society, it appears to be, coming back to a theme from earlier, a series of random events with random people making random decisions. But actually, the society transforming decisions and changes are actually coming from the spider. This is why it's all so coordinated. So, for instance, if you come out into the world of the seen, that part of the web, and you see Facebook, and you see Google, and you see Amazon, if you follow that back through the web, you're going to the real controllers. And I'd say the same with Apple and this stuff. And so you then have, in the public arena, this clearly coordinated response where all of them together ban Alex Jones. You know, it's in one go.
Well,
I mean, what
yeah.
are the,
Twitter waited a little while.
Yeah, they waited a little while, yeah. But then went. And, you know, if people are frightened of information, why are they frightened of information? I'm not frightened of information. I'm not frightened of people having a different view to me. I'm not frightened of people questioning or challenging what I'm saying. Because people who are confident and assured that they feel that what they're saying has validity, they welcome challenge, because then they can express themselves and show that they do have validity, because they are meeting this challenge. They are answering these questions. People who are not sure that they have validity or know that what they're doing won't stand up to scrutiny, they stop the scrutiny. And for all, you know, the things that I don't agree with about Alex Jones and what he says, he's said a lot of things over the years that people needed to hear. And, you know, for Alex Jones is everybody, in the sense of this is an unfolding agenda. So where we are is where we are. It's not where it's supposed to end. So it's Alex Jones today, and you who are celebrating the fact that Alex Jones has been deplatformed, it will be you tomorrow. And then you'll say, oh no, this is outrageous. Yes, and it was when Alex Jones, someone you didn't agree with, was deplatformed. Why are we so fearful of other people having different opinions? And what's happening, and this again is a really important point, is that the old traditional left that I grew up with, that, I mean, I still can see the pictures on black and white television of mass marches of students at Berkeley University in California demanding freedom of speech in the Flower Power days and stuff. And now students at that university and other universities, they go on marches or protests demanding that freedom of speech is deleted. And they don't realize that eventually it will be their freedom of speech that disappears. It's like that great saying from that pastor Niemöller in Nazi Germany. First they came for the Jews, and I was not a Jew, so I did nothing. Then they came for the communists. I was not a communist, so I did nothing. Then they came for the trade unionists. I was not a trade unionist, so they did nothing. I did nothing. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. And what's happening is people are being picked off in groups. Yes, it's so-called conspiracy theorists now, much of which is provable fact, by the way. But it'll be someone else tomorrow, and then someone else, and then someone else, until we've reached that point where people are only allowed to say, or even have the vehicle of saying, what is acceptable to the authorities. And that's precisely what George Orwell was talking about in 1984. When, by the way, as people will remember if they watch the movie of 1984, you had that session every day of hate, where they put the picture of Emmanuel Goldstein, the villain of Big Brother, who he used to demonize and unite the population in hatred of him. They put his picture up, and they had to shout hatred at the picture. But what was it, 2-3 minutes? Well, what is that except what we're seeing now from this progressive left that's not progressive at all? It's regressive. And not only that, it claims to be anti-fascist while using all the techniques of fascism. It's worth it's a sobering thought, really, to contemplate on what happens when any tyranny gets power, whether it's a Nazi tyranny, a Stalinist tyranny, whatever, wants to control the information, wants to shut down all debate and all criticism and all challenge and all information that will get people to question what the tyranny is telling them to believe. So what did the Nazis do? They burnt the books. They used to break up public meetings with their stormtroopers where people were challenging the Nazis. What happened in Stalinist Russia? The same. And here we have people now who've been through fierce programming. I do feel for them, really, through the universities and colleges, not least of America, who are claiming to be anti-fascist, who are using the very same techniques that fascism and Stalinism used, and all tyrannies always use. But they have such lack of self-awareness, they can't see that they are everything they rail against. And what we have is a thought process, I say what passes for a thought process, which basically says, I am right. And because I am right, anyone that has a different opinion is by definition wrong. And because they're wrong, what does it matter if they have freedom of speech or not? They're wrong. So freedom of speech doesn't matter. This guy who took me to court in Canada was interviewed by the independent Sunday magazine, as it was then, and actually said this: Ike is clearly mad, therefore all his followers, as he called them, I hope I don't have any, are also mad. And this was the line: so what is the benefit in allowing him to speak? And that is what I'm seeing now, increasingly. People saying, I am right, so what is the benefit of allowing to speak people who are wrong? And it's a level of narcissism and a level of conceit that is driving political correctness and is driving this censorship agenda. And it's interesting when you kind of look at it from this perspective. What this political correctness, political identity politics is Marxism. It's classic Marxism. For this reason. First of all, Karl Marx was not the people's champion. I go into this in a book I've just nearly finished. He was the banker's boy. And the idea was to create a philosophy and a political structure that sold itself as government of the people for the oppressed masses, when actually it was the opposite. For instance, if you look at Marxist stroke communist countries, you look at Stalinist Russia, you look at China, they're not governments of the people, they're tyrannies imposing their will on the people. So Marxism is a tyranny which creates what? A structure of top-down control which allows the few to dictate to the many. And the few dictating to the many in Marxist societies are basically the same elite that are dictating to the many in so-called capitalist societies. But look how Marxism works. The philosophy basically was you transform society by playing groups off against each other. You know, the elite and the masses, and the class struggle, and all that stuff. You transform society by playing groups off against each other. Well, in that kind of Marxism, you had the elite, the wealthy, and the oppressed masses. That was the two basic groups that were played off against each other. What we have now in modern Marxism is identity politics, where you create multiple groups who self-identify, and you play them off against each other to transform society. And so you have a situation with identity politics where your point of reference, whereby you judge everything and you respond to everything, whatever happens, is how does this affect my identity group? It's not, is it fair? Is it just? Is it right by everybody? It's how does this affect my identity group? So what you've got is these multiple groups getting bigger all the time, because I think they're breeding, where you've got self-identity groups that can be played off against each other. And this is classic Marxism group struggle for power, which is transforming human society. And this is why we have now this, for me, having been brought up with the traditional left years ago, extraordinary situation where you've got an alliance between so-called progressives and multinational corporations that are censoring the internet. So, whereas the old left would have railed against that, the new fake progressive left cheers the censorship of people like Alex Jones. Why? Because it's political identity. The criteria for an alliance is no longer, are you in my income bracket, are you one of the oppressed against the elite, but are you supporting my self-identity group? And because that's the criteria, you now have alliances between the progressive left, for instance, and self-identity groups, and George Soros, a multi-billionaire financier who actually said he doesn't take into account any social consequences of what he does in his finance because he's only there to make money. Now, someone says that, he's now in alliance and massively funding, the biggest funder of all, of the progressive left in all its forms and the self-identity politics in all its forms. There's an alliance between them. Why? Because they perceive multi-billionaire elite Soros as an ally of their self-identity group. That's the criteria now. Not elite and oppressed, but whether you support the identity group or not.
So more irony.
more irony. So in that sense now, you've got the so-called progressive left cheering and supporting multi-billionaire companies.
Like Alphabet.
Yes, exactly, Alphabet, who are
Google.
Are censoring free speech.
And this is all the plan of the cabal at the
Yes.
end of the day. Okay.
The progressive left, the violin strings, they're being played like a violin. And what happens every time with these kind of revolutions, if you like, is they eat themselves in the end, because at the end of the story, when the tyranny is complete, then the people that were stormtroopers for the tyranny, they end up in the gulags. And the world they thought they were fighting for actually turns out to be nothing like it actually manifests in the end. And history shows this over and over again, and we're just going through another more extreme form, a global form of it now, whereby another tyranny, a global tyranny this time, is being created.
And how does this ultimately play out? I mean, what does the cabal want in the end? And also, I mean, these aren't necessarily human entities, this cabal that's controlling
In the
us.
end, they're not. No.
Okay.
In the end, they're not.
Why not get rid of us all?
But in the totality of what's happening in the world in general, you know, there is this web here, and the spider I talked about is ultimately not human. No.
And what is its agenda ultimately, do you believe?
Well, first of all, we're dealing with a level of psychopathy, a level of psychopath that is almost beyond the imagination. So you're not dealing with a rational consciousness.
We can't comprehend it as humans.
You're not dealing with a rational consciousness. I mean, what's rational about a serial killer? Nothing. What's rational about people that act against others in ways that cause horrific consequences for others? Nothing rational about it. It's madness. It's a fundamental psychological flaw in their psyche. It's what psychopathy is. And what is the greatest trait of a psychopath? Lack of empathy. Having no ability to put themselves in the feelings of those they affect. And once you have no empathy, which is what psychopaths don't have, you have no emotional consequence for anything you do. So you have no limits. There's no fail-safe mechanism of human behavior, which is empathy. I can't do this because look at the effect it will have on these people. I couldn't do that to them. When that's gone, anything goes. This is why this cabal makes things happen in the world, and has done through history, that have had horrific consequences for people because they have no empathy. And I hear people say, oh, they'd never do that. No. You'd never do that because you have empathy. They don't have empathy, therefore they would do that. And not only that, they'd get off on it.
And what is their agenda? Why not get rid of us? Why do they need us? It's not like The Matrix where they need us for information, although The Matrix is featured in your film.
Well, maybe they need us for many things. Maybe when Morpheus in The Matrix held the battery up and said the machines have turned humans into one of these. Basically, they've turned humans into an energy source. Maybe that's not too far from the truth. But in the realm of the world that we live in and we understand, the agenda is to assimilate all human consciousness, what we now call human thought and emotional responses, into artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence becomes everything we think and everything we, quote, feel. Not there'll be a lot of feeling then. And it's happening in front of our eyes.
2030 is a year you keep talking about.
Well, I talk about 2030 for simple reason that they talk about 2030. You know, what has happened now is, well, let's go through this from the start and the process, because it's a very simple process, and it locks into that process of the internet and the internet giants I talked about earlier. let's go to the outcome again. Know the outcome, you'll see the journey. The outcome is that they want to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence, so artificial intelligence becomes human consciousness, and we're assimilated. We're basically become a terminal on an AI internet.
It's still not clear to me why they would want that, but let's assume they do.
Yeah, well, we don't even have to assume it because they're telling us they do. And so we've been through a process of preparation, of getting people, first of all, stage one, addicted to technology that they hold, holdables, smartphones, tablets. That's basically achieved. I mean, you just have to walk through a city and you see the addiction. And they're targeting specifically the young. Why? Because the young of today and children of today are going to be the adults when they want to bring this AI connection in full blown. For that to happen, they have to get people addicted to technology to the point where they'll accept it and where it's the most natural thing in the world. I'm coming up 67. I was born in 1952, so I have a compass. I know what the world was like before. People being born into the world now, this is the only world they've ever known. And so, they don't have that compass of what the world was like before. Well, this is the world and technology, and this is how it works. And I know from the time I've lived just how recent this is and how fast it's come in, like out of almost nowhere. And so the first stage is to get people addicted to technology to the point where, at the most extreme, they'll get up in the dead of night and they'll queue, stand in line outside an Apple store to get the first of the new technology. And what they want eventually, and not too distant into the future, is people basically lining up to be connected to AI. In the same way that people in Sweden now are having parties to celebrate someone being microchipped, right? All this connects. So the next stage, because the idea is to get in the body, the next stage is to get on the body. So we went from just holdables, we went to wearables, we went to Bluetooth and Google Glass and Apple Watches and all these other gadgets that go on the body now. Even what they call electronic tattoos that are basically microchips on the skin. And the next stage is to go in the body, which is already starting in places like Sweden. And the idea is to take this on, and people like Ray Kurzweil, who is a Google executive. I mean, Google and Facebook are really at the cutting edge of this stuff. People think it's a social media operation only or a search engine only. No. This whole Google group now, which is given the name Alphabet, are absolutely at the cutting edge of this whole AI technology. So is Amazon. Amazon's got contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars with the CIA and the Pentagon for cloud services and stuff.
Yeah, they have massive data services.
Massive, yeah.
The consumers don't see.
So the idea is to take this on. And what Kurzweil is saying, and he claims an 80% success rate in his predictions of incoming technology and when it will come in. But, if you know when it's going to come in, then you've got a great chance of predicting it, haven't you? It's like if you know when a stock market's going to fall because the people you are connected to are going to make it fall, well, you're going to get out just before it falls. And you're going to get in just before you know they're going to push it up. I mean, you don't have to be, Nostradamus if you know the script.
But anyway, if this was his agenda, maybe he shouldn't tell us.
Yeah.
Or is it so clever that he's telling us?
No, this is why he's telling us. It's the sales pitch.
Okay.
The sales pitch, and this is why they're being...
We have the illusion of choice that we're going to be a part of it.
This is the sales pitch, and this is why they're telling you. The sales pitch is when we connect to artificial intelligence, will be superhuman. That's what the sales pitch is. That's his sales pitch.
Right.
That's going
Siri,
to be the sales pitch.
Alexa, all these things.
Yeah. Well, I'll come to them in a second. They're very, very interesting and very important.
Okay.
So what you've got is the idea that connect to AI and you'll become superhuman intelligent. No, you'll become subhuman intelligent. You'll become a vehicle for artificial intelligence. And whoever controls artificial intelligence will control the perceptions of every mind that it's connected to. And that's the sales pitch, but then that's the reality of what it really means. Now, if you're going to make a physical connection with AI, you're not going to do that on a mass scale until you've made a psychological connection. And there is a process, a psychological process, which is known as preemptive programming. Preemptive programming is this. You're going to usher in a world that is so different, so dramatically different to what anyone's been used to, that you're going to have an obvious resistance purely by the chasm of difference between the world people are used to and the world you're taking them into. A resistance that says, hold on a minute, you want to do what? 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 So you prepare them for it through preemptive programming. You put out a stream of movies out of elite-controlled Hollywood. You put out television programs, you put out books, you put out all these things that basically portray the world you want to take people into. This is why you've seen so many movies about control by robots, control by technology, of synthetic humans, which has the transgender agenda very much a part of it, connected to it. You have the synthetic humans, consciousness going into synthetic humans. You have the dystopian society being portrayed and portrayed and portrayed. And what that's doing, it's making the subconscious, to an extent the conscious mind, familiar with the world you want to usher in. So when you literally start to bring it in, there's not that chasm that there would have been before. There is almost a familiarity with it because you prepared people by portraying it over and over again in movies. And another part of this psychological connection with artificial intelligence, so we'll accept the outcome that I've talked about, is these Alexas and these Echoes and these so-called office assistants or personal assistants. Because people, I've met people who've got one in every room. And you start to interact with them as if they're human. And now they're bringing in internet-connected toys for kids, even little kids, and Barbie dolls that they can actually have conversations with artificial intelligence. They're now bringing in these robots that are these synthetic robots that are looking more and more like humans, a lot of them coming in from the East. And this is a whole psychological process of familiarizing us with artificial intelligence, to getting people to interact with it until it becomes the most natural thing in the world.
Well, is this a positive thing? What if it makes us live better lives? Could it be?
Well, if you want to use artificial intelligence to make things happen in a more efficient way, well, there's an argument for that. But that's not an argument for connecting AI to the human brain and the human perceptual processes, so that artificial intelligence becomes those processes. And I'm not just saying that. Ray Kurzweil says this, that by 2030, the connections will start to be made between artificial intelligence and the human brain. And the human brain will be connected to what he calls the cloud. Another name for this is the smart grid, basically to artificial intelligence. And he says this too, because his sales pitch is it will be fantastic, it will be superhuman, that as time passes, artificial intelligence will be more and more of human thinking and human perception until basically it's the totality of human thinking and human perception, at which point we won't be human anymore in terms of the consciousness processes we are using today. We will be artificial intelligence. And this is the assimilation I'm talking about. And the point is that if you are connecting the human mind to a grid, a global technological grid, that grid can be centrally controlled. It will take at the center point very, very few people to run it, and even fewer to decide how it's run. And where will any questioning be? Where will any process of debate be? There won't be any. There will just be perceptions coming on tap from a central point. Will just be a hive mind. This is the term they're using, the human hive mind. The sales pitch is all minds will be connected, and then we'll all be able to use all the intelligence of everybody's mind, and we'll be able to go into fantastic realms of possibility.
Which could happen. Elon Musk says it will make us better humans.
No, that's the sales pitch. The outcome is you have the human hive mind, everyone connected, which means a central point can control all of them. And I would take Elon Musk more seriously if he didn't come out and say that artificial intelligence could be the end of humanity. And he's right on that, the end of humanity as we know it, certainly. But then start a company called Neuralink to connect human brains to artificial intelligence, and use his company, SpaceX, to put up endless thousands of satellites, beaming Wi-Fi at the Earth to create the very cloud of connection that will allow everybody to be connected to artificial intelligence. The sales pitch of Wi-Fi everywhere, every inch of the planet, which is why they're putting thousands of satellites up to beam it at us, so no one can escape from it.
This is 5G.
Well, 5G is a massively more powerful and more destructive level of the power of communication, but the Wi-Fi is necessary to create this, quote, cloud that Kurzweil describes, whereby no one can escape from it, because it will be everywhere because it's coming from space. And without that cloud, you wouldn't have the ability to encompass everybody in this technological reality. But because they're putting satellites up, and Elon Musk is the one putting most of them up, they're being able to create this global Wi-Fi cloud, because the sales pitch, like I said, is, we want everybody to be connected. Yes, you do, here. That's what it's about, but they won't obviously tell you that. And 5G, you bring up a very important point. 5G is a weapon. It's used by the military. Do you know these 5G millimeter wave technologies are used to scatter crowds? They drive up in this technology when they want to scatter a cloud, and they put out these frequencies in a much higher power than 5G will be initially with us, but the same frequencies. And people scatter because they get the feeling their skin is on fire. Because the human body, including the skin, is an antenna. It interacts with frequencies, and it receives and transmits information. At the cutting edge of understanding of DNA, scientists know that DNA is a receiver-transmitter of information. And so we are electromagnetic, electrical organisms, transmitters and receivers of information. When our electromagnetic fields are in balance and harmony, we have health. We have psychological health, and we have physical health. The reason that this technological society is causing so much psychological and quote, physical disease is because these frequencies, technologically driven, and we live in this Wi-Fi world now and all the phone masts and all the rest of it, these technologically generated frequencies are scrambling the balance of the human electromagnetic electrical communication systems. And if you scramble them, you create a state of disharmony, dis-ease, which plays through to physical and mental, emotional, psychological dis-ease. And there's another point to this. The brain processes information electrically. It communicates with the cellular structure electrically. And it operates within a certain band of frequency. If you can broadcast frequencies carrying information, this technology has long been known, carrying information and perceptions within the frequency that the brain decodes information, the brain will decode those frequencies and will have those perceptions. You can externally, even without connection to AI, although that's the piece de la resistance, if you like, that's the kind of holy grail. But even before that, you can influence people's perceptions externally by broadcasting these frequencies that we interact with, because we are antenna. Okay. Now, some decades ago, there was a guy who worked out the frequencies of different emotional states. This is long ago. I mean, it's very, very sophisticated now. So every thought, every emotional response is a frequency. It generates a frequency, and it is of itself a frequency. Hate is a frequency, and it's different to love. You know, when you are in a room and there's lots of aggression and conflict and hatred, you feel it. What do people say? Oh God, you can cut the atmosphere with a knife in there. That is because the frequencies of hate and conflict have been so generated, they have changed the electromagnetic field of the room.
Okay, so 5G is going to be weaponized against us potentially.
Yeah, but the point being that they worked out the frequencies of various emotions, including rage and what have you. And basically, they can play across a community these frequencies without anyone knowing, and it starts to have an effect, and it starts to build rage, it starts to build anger, and people might not realize why they're feeling it, but they start to feel it. And then what they do is they trigger that with an event. Maybe some guy is attacked by the police or something, or somebody's arrested for something they didn't commit, and now there's the trigger. The blue touch paper's been lit of this manufactured frequency-driven rage, and you have mass riots and what have you, and people do things that they wouldn't normally do, and you can make people depressed. You know, the American military, they've admitted this. They have technology that fires frequencies at the enemy that basically breaks the enemy's spirit, so they give up and put their weapons down. This is the technology we're dealing with. Now you take that into account and then you think of 5G. First of all, 5G doesn't travel well because of the nature of its frequency. So instead of big towers, as we have now, broadcasting these frequencies long distances, it won't do that. And it doesn't go through solid objects, what we call solid objects, very well either. So to overcome that, there are going to be boxes broadcasting 5G, this weapon, down every street, all over the world. You're talking phenomenal numbers of these boxes, broadcasting like on the lamp standard outside your children's bedroom and stuff, broadcasting this stuff. There's no way you'll be able to go where you won't be in a field of 5G. And another interesting thing, I don't know whether you've noticed this, but the story broke, first of all, in Sheffield, when the council started cutting down literally thousands and thousands and thousands of mature trees in urban streets. And there were big protests about it. You know, Sheffield claimed to be a green city, but all these mature trees were coming down, thousands of them. And my brother, he works at breakdown, they'll call him, he'll come down and fix it on the side of the road. So he's traveling all the time. And he's saying it's amazing how many mature trees are being cut down. Overwhelmingly in urban places. Now, the worst nightmare, I'm not saying cause and effect, but I'm saying think on it. The worst nightmare of 5G in a street is mature trees, because it can't get through them. They don't want urban trees for 5G because it won't go through solid objects very well at all, and it doesn't travel far. So we're going to have this explosion of 5G transmitters, and then, going back to what I said earlier, and they've admitted this too, there's going to be like 20,000 satellites up there beaming 5G at the Earth. And
this is dark stuff, David.
It's dark stuff. Why have I spent 30 years taking abuse and ridicule? Because I feel people need to know this stuff so we can head it off. This is not to say, oh, doom and gloom, oh, God, this is going to happen, dystopia's coming, oh, fear. I'm saying this is what the plan is, so let's intervene. There's 7.7 billion of us. There's a fraction of people that are actually doing this. See, the people putting the boxes on the lamp standards and the posts haven't got a clue what they're doing. They're just paid to do it. The people who are telling them to do it haven't got a clue why they're doing it. They're just telling them to do it. And so the hierarchy goes further and further and further into the web until you go into the hidden. And at that point, you'll see where it's coming from. And they know. See, about, what was it, 3 weeks, a month ago, saw a video of, it was a Senate hearing on Capitol Hill about 5G. And this senator asked these representatives of the industry, how much have you spent on independent research into the potential dangers of 5G? And what they said was, nothing. No independent research. Why? See, when you speak for long enough with these things, all the bits kind of tend to connect. They don't want to debate on 5G because they can't win it. So if they had independent research, which was published widely, there would be such outrage against 5G, they would never be able to get it in, so they don't have it. And they admitted this. There was a guy called Wheeler. He was the head of the Federal Communications Commission in America. We're supposed to protect the public from this stuff, from the telecommunications industry. It just so happened that before he became head of the industry watchdog, he was the head of the leading lobbyist organization on behalf of the telecommunications industry. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. And he made a speech at the National Press Club in America. Someone else has got the job now, but when he was still head of the FCC, and he openly said, we're not going down the road of regulation with 5G because there's basically too much money to be made, and therefore we're just going to let the industry decide what's safe and not safe. And the industry will decide what's safe on the basis of, what do we want to do? We want to do this, okay? Okay, so that's the safe level then, right? Because what they say, this is the scam. Well, it's not dangerous because these are within the safety guidelines. Like 5G is within the safety guidelines. Yeah, because what you do is you say, what do you need to do? We need to do this. Okay, so we'll put the safety guideline there. So although you're doing something extremely destructive for human health and human mental and physical health, we can say it's within the guidelines because we put the guidelines higher than what you're doing.
Okay, so we need to question this, and we really need to be aware about that in the AI piece. Can I ask you about climate change?
Yeah.
And your read on that. Mm-hmm. Big debate right now, global warming, human-made. How do you see what's actually happening here?
Scam. I mentioned earlier an organization called the Club of Rome. Club of Rome was started in 1968. And it's part of a network of organizations. Towards the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, secret society was created in Britain called the Round Table. The first head of it was Cecil Rhodes, who was a Rothschild agent. That's why he went into southern Africa and pillaged the gold and diamond resources and destroyed that society on behalf of the Rothschilds. And he was the head of the Round Table. Then when he died, another guy called Alfred Milner took over, another Rothschild agent. And this secret society started spawning satellite organizations. First one they created was the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London, also known as Chatham House. Think tanks, this is what they are. Watch the think tanks, big time. And then they created something in America, which was an American version of that, called the Council on Foreign Relations. Council on Foreign Relations has, to a very large extent, driven American foreign policy ever since to this day. Then came the Bilderberg Group in 1954, formed at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland. Then in 1968 came the Club of Rome, and then came the Trilateral Commission in 72, 73. Now the Club of Rome was created specifically to use the environment as an excuse to transform society. And I've been writing about this for a long time. And basically, you say, to save the planet, this has to happen. And to save the planet, it's a globe, therefore we have to have global centralization of power to save the planet. And so the Club of Rome has been one of the big drivers of human-caused climate change, or the illusion of it. And then came a United Nations agenda called Agenda 21. And that laid out a strategy for transforming society to meet the challenge of climate change. It was everything that they wanted. And then later, more recently, they've advanced that and they call it now Agenda 2030, which is an updated version of the same thing. And when you read Agenda 2030, it is a tyranny's dream, because it dictates every area of human life, including education, to save the planet. And this is problem, reaction, solution, as I call it. And this has been worked towards for a long time. So you create the illusion of the problem, and then you offer the solutions to the problem, which is centralization of power, centralized control. Now, bringing it up to date, one of the most classic Soros progressives around today is a lady in America, a congresswoman, she's recently elected, called Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's classic, nothing to do with facts, just this is how it is. And she's just come out now, and it's got a lot of coverage in America, a lot of support in the Democratic Party, called the Green New Deal. Because she says, I would say bizarrely, and scientists would also say bizarrely too, that we have 12 years to save the planet. We had a few years to save the planet some years back, and it long passed and we're still here. And what her Green New Deal demands is exactly what I've been writing for years, is the plan to transform human society into a centralized dictatorship on the justification of we have to do this to save the planet.
And we don't need to save the planet.
No.
And humans aren't causing an aggressive form of global warming.
No, the planet doesn't need saving. I mean, its natural balance mechanisms will kick us off before it needs any help.
But are we going to harm ourselves more in the meantime?
No, I've just been reading. See, it's a psychological game. So you have a major weather event in the 1950s, and it's a major weather event. Oh yeah, well that was a bit extreme, wasn't it? You have one now, global warming, it's climate change. And I've just been reading a very, very interesting book by an American meteorologist called Joe Bastardi, who is, since he was a little kid, he was obsessed with the weather. He just loves weather and weather forecasting, and he's just really kind of obsessed with it. And he was observing all this. And being obsessed with the weather, he's looked at charts going back forever, And he's looking at all these claims about this is global warming, this is climate change. And he's going, well, hold on a minute. That happened in the 1950s. That happened in the 1920s. And what he does in this book is he shows the repeating cycles that cause the outcome. So in the 1920s or earlier, there is a cycle where the Atlantic cools and the Pacific warms. There's another cycle where the Pacific cools and the Atlantic warms. And that has a knock-on effect that eventually reaches a weather outcome. Now, he's pointing out in this book that when this sequence happens today, the outcome is, that's climate change, we're all going to die. And then he goes back in his book and he shows that in the 1950s, the 1940s, this same cycle happened, and the outcome that he's now blamed on climate change happened. I mean, the planet today is nothing like as warm as it was in what they call the medieval warm period, when there was no carbon dioxide emissions from technology. I mean, what caused it then? Turbocharged handcarts? I mean, it's crazy. And the other thing is that we went from this really warm period, the medieval warm period, about 1,000 years ago, and then we came down into what they call the Little Ice Age, which is still portrayed today on some Christmas cards with people skating on the Thames, when temperatures became very, very cold. And there's a correlation between the two, which I'll come to in a second. And then we started coming out of the Little Ice Age into the present day. And a lot of, they say, this is the warmest day since records began. A lot of those records began, well, we're still coming out of the Little Ice Age. So the comparison between then and now is completely unsupportable. Have you noticed that whenever they're talking about the climate and climate change and global warming, they never mention the bloody sun. They don't mention it. It's all carbon dioxide. But by the way, without carbon dioxide, we'd all be dead. It's what gives life to the planet. And another, by the way, 98% or thereabouts of greenhouse gases, which are supposed to hold the heat in, or do hold the heat in, is water vapor and clouds. And when you see the graph, there's water vapor and clouds. Here's carbon dioxide. And the vast majority of this carbon dioxide is naturally generated, not human generated. And
what about methane and all the ones that animals?
Yeah, but they're tiny,
right.
tiny,
but
tiny.
It has a big effect, though.
They're even less. What are we do? Going to kill all the animals? What are we going to do? Legislate against condensation when 98% of it's caused by water vapor? It's ridiculous.
So it's another scam to get people's attention to create control.
But like I was just going to say, they never talk about the sun. Now, it's well known that solar activity, these great emissions of power which we experience as heat coming from the sun, you can see when the sun is in an up period of, if you like, power by the number of sunspots. Because these sunspots are massive projections from the sun that are bigger than the Earth, well bigger than the Earth. And they travel through on the solar wind and we get them as heat. And so when the sun is very inactive, there's very few sunspots, sometimes virtually none. And these have been looked at in their cycles through this period that I'm talking about. And when we reached the minimum, the bottom of the Little Ice Age, when it was at its coldest, it's known in climate science as the Maunder minimum. And it's named after a guy called Maunder, and his wife was there as well, who were charting sunspot activity and its relationship to Earth temperature. And they picked up a correlation. And one of the correlations was that when there was virtually no sunspot activity, we reached the coldest point of the Maunder minimum, the Little Ice Age as they call it. And then sunspot activity started again, and we started to climb out of this Little Ice Age into present day. So when you discount basically the impact of the sun on temperature, your climate models are irrelevant. Irrelevant, because the basic foundation factor of what dictates the temperature of the planet, the flipping sun, is not taken into account on anything like what it should be to get an accurate projection of what's going to happen. Then you look at this from the point of view of prediction against experience. According to Al Gore, well before now, there should be basically no ice in the summer at the North Pole. Funnily enough, there is. And this should have happened, and that should have happened. And another thing that Joe Bastardi points out in his kind of lifelong love of weather is that we're told that all these extreme weather events now are increasing because of climate change. He's saying they're not. They're not increasing. There were more tornadoes and hurricanes way back than there are now. And there were more extreme weather events than we have now. But because it's a psychological game, if you keep saying every time, notice what they've done now in Britain, which they've never done before, they've started naming storms. Like they name hurricanes, which are kind of not very often, so you just name a few. They must be running out of names. Because every time there's a storm that you would call, it's a bit more than, it's going to be a bit rough, they give it a name.
All right, so it's another psychological tactic.
It's more scary.
All right, so we need to ignore it.
Well, what we need to do is to research ourselves beyond the official narrative. And if we do, we'll find an amazing thing, that there are a lot of scientists, increasing all the time, by the way, who are saying, actually, it's not happening, is it? It's not real, is it? There's many, many scientists now that were on the bandwagon, it's happening, and we're now saying, well, actually, I'm reassessing it. I don't think it is now. I don't think this is real. And all that is available if you search for it. But when you've got a situation where the BBC, that's supposed to be this neutral organization, well, it's the way I tell them, that actually made a decision that the science is settled, therefore we're not having people on that are saying otherwise, then what you're doing again, back to the same theme, you're skewing the debate. Because all people are hearing is climate change is real. If they don't go searching elsewhere, climate change is real, we're all going to die. You are disgustingly, mercilessly frightening young children of the devastation and the horror that they're going to face for a political agenda. That's what's happening. So and the school, I mean, my son, Jamie, because he thinks for himself, when he was at school, and he had an exam, and part of the exam was climate change, he was obviously going to put that actually there's evidence to say that it's actually not happening. And his teacher said, well, I have sympathy with that, but if you say that, you won't pass. Right? So again, wherever you look, where there's an agenda you can't win, you don't have the agenda, or you don't have the debate. So what you have now is anyone that is questioning the official narrative of so-called global warming, climate change, and it became climate change, by the way, when the temperatures leveled out and they couldn't call it global warming anymore. They're now climate deniers, which is obviously psychologically linking to Holocaust deniers, etc., etc. And so if you only hear one thing, that's overwhelmingly going to be the perception you have. Okay. And if you say to people, well, why do you believe that climate change caused by humans is real? They'll say, well, everybody knows that. Well, everybody knows that because that's all everyone's ever heard. When you go and do the research, you find actually it's a house of cards. It's just based on repetition. You know, go and research the 97% of scientists believe that global warming is caused by humans. Go and research that, and you'll find, if you follow it back, it's based on wind. It's based on no substance whatsoever. It's a complete hoax, but it's a great line. Oh, 97% of scientists agree that it's caused by humans. Oh, well, if 97% of scientists agree, it must be true. You chart that number back and see where it came from. Even the Wall Street Journal trashed that.
Okay.
But it's still parroted all the time as justification for transforming human society, destroying beautiful landscapes with wind farms that are incredibly inefficient, and so on.
Let me move on to money, because money might have been the pre-internet way of controlling the population. What do you tell people to do with their money, how to be aware of money, and how is money used in a similar way as a psychological tool?
Well, money doesn't really exist. It's a theory. If you look at how the world's been acquired, it's been done by a banking scam where you lend people money that doesn't exist. We call it credit, and you charge them interest on it. And if they don't pay the money back plus interest, then you get their wealth that does exist. You get their home, their business, their land, their resources, whatever. And we've been through a process of banks lending credit, figures on a screen, greatly in excess of what they have as assets, called fractional reserve lending. And then when they can't pay it back, because often the banks have taken actions that have crashed the economy, like in 2008, the banks then get all the things they've lent money on, the real wealth of the world. And what's happened in this process of lending credit, getting the real resources when they can't pay back the credit, has sucked the wealth of the world, the real wealth of the world, into the hands of a very, very few people, and left out there most of the rest of the population with something called money. And money only buys anything because we take it seriously. You know, if it's just a piece of paper, and this is the point, it's meant not even to be a piece of paper, it's meant to be purely electronic. And so we have this fresh air money that is worth something because the buyer and the seller believe in it, and only because of that. And the real wealth of the world has been sucked into the hands of a very few people by lending this scam called credit. Another interesting thing about this money situation is when you go to a bank and you say, borrow £50,000, they'll type into your account £50,000 in credit. Where's the credit come from? Here. But you're not paying back £50,000. You're paying back £50,000 plus interest. The interest is never created, only the principal. Because people think that governments create money. Money is overwhelmingly created by private banks issuing credit. That's how so-called money comes into circulation. So what this means is creating credit for the principal but not the interest, is that at no point is there ever enough money, credit or otherwise, in circulation to pay back all the debt and all the interest on the debt outstanding. So people losing their homes and their businesses and their resources, etc., is built into the system on purpose. Now, when there's an expansion of the money supply, an expansion of money in circulation, Peter paying Paul, that seems, to hide it to an extent. But once you squeeze the money supply, you take money out of circulation, it becomes obvious that there's nothing like enough money in circulation to pay back all the debt. So there's people losing their homes, their resources, their things that they own, for no other reason that there simply is not enough money for everyone to pay back the debt. So what do the banks do? Ooh, we'll have that. And this has been going on for centuries, and they've hijacked the real wealth of the world by doing this. And the next stage, which is in my books from the early 1990s, is the cashless society. I was pointing out, purely by knowledge of what this agenda was, that they were going to get rid of cash. And look at it. Cash is flying out of circulation. In some places like Sweden, it's almost totally cashless. They're shutting down bank branches, so you cannot interact with a bank branch locally with cash. You have to do it online because that's electronic money. And eventually they're going to take cash out of circulation. Why? Because when you go into a store now or anywhere and you give them a credit card, electronic money, and they say, sorry, the system won't accept your card, well, you can still pay cash. But when there's no cash in circulation, your electronic money, which is meant to go through a microchip eventually, when they say the system won't accept your microchip or your card, you have no other means of purchase. So whoever controls the system is dictating whether you can purchase or whether you can't, whether you can eat or whether you can't. And the only other alternative to that would be barter. And I'll tell you what the plan is. The plan is to ban barter, to make it illegal on the basis that they can't tax it. So that's along the line as well.
How does cryptocurrency play into this?
Well, what is cryptocurrency? Cashless society.
Yeah.
Now,
and created by a private institution, another currency created by a private institution.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there couldn't be good things with things like Bitcoin and stuff like that, as long as cash stays in circulation. That's the key.
So you have an anonymous option.
Yeah.
Really.
While cash is in circulation, you have other points of or ways of purchase. Once there's no cash and you have only cashless digital currencies, then whoever controls them controls everything. And not only that, they can wipe your bank account. If you're a dissident of the system, as this moves on into more extremes, they can wipe your bank account. And it's just gone. Because all it is figures on a screen. You can wipe figures on a screen in a second. You can, from a central point, crash the entire economy by controlling digital money and digital processes. And the idea eventually, problem, reaction, solution, create the problem and then offer the solution, is to have a gigantic crash, which they will instigate. And then to overcome the crash, they will propose a totally new economic system of central control to be the solution to the problem they've created, which is crashing the economy. And the more control they have over money digitally, electrically, the easier it is to do that. And cash is flying out of circulation. Why are they taking ATMs away in large numbers? So you can't interact with cash anymore.
It's easier not to use cash.
Yes, and when you're going around, and you a credit card that can be useful, a debit card that can be useful, but only when cash still exists. When cash disappears, and it's, like I say, it's disappearing so fast, what is now useful becomes a form of total control. And that's what it's supposed to be going, because, you know, this is the point. You're not going to sell a tyranny by telling people it's a tyranny. You sell a tyranny by selling the tyranny on the basis of things that people might think are beneficial. And by the time they realize actually what the game is, it's a tyranny and there's no turning back. And this is what we're seeing in all these different areas. By the time the penny drops in the great majority of people that human-caused climate change is a hoax, society will be transformed and irreversible using the excuse that it's real. Same with the cashless society.
So all roads lead to hell here, David.
They do, but if you think they lead to heaven or lead somewhere, you know, okay, you're going to take that road. Oh, you're not going to resist being pushed down that road.
So we need to question everything.
When you realize where it's going, which is the whole point of my life, really, then you can say, hold on a minute, we ain't going there. And that's the point. And that's why they're trying to shut me down. And people like me down, because they don't want people to know what this outcome is planned to be. Because if billions know what the outcome is, the few are not going to force those billions to take that outcome anymore. That's why they have to keep it quiet. That's why they're shutting down debate. That's why they're lying to us on a monumental scale.
So you want us to question everything, challenge everything. That's what we need to do. We need to all wake up as individuals and start being part of this debate, everything that's happening around us. Is that really what you want?
Yeah. Instead of taking people's word for it, including mine, including anybody's, certainly including governments and corporations and media, if you haven't got time to research it for yourself immediately, then put it into neutral. Don't believe it or disbelieve it, but don't react as if it's true. Just put it in neutral until you've had time to check it out for yourself. And when you do, you'll realize invariably, as I did, that the official story, the official narratives are invariably either completely, most of the time, total lies or overwhelmingly misleading. And crucial, because of what we were talking about earlier, don't be intimidated into silence. Don't. Because if you silence yourself, eventually everything goes silent. When people are telling you what you can't say it louder, say it more often. And if people around you don't like it, well, find another circle of friends then. Because there are more and more people that you will find if you look for them, because more and more people are awakening to this. And like I said earlier, you can get the impression from the people that control the microphones and the cameras that there is a certain view of the world which is different from yours. But you talk to enough people and you'll realize that behind this reticence to speak their truth, they feel the same as you do behind your reticence to speak your truth. I went to a bookshop years ago in the middle of the mass ridicule. It was in Oxford. And the manager came up to me. He said, "I have a very interesting thing today," he said. He said, "What I did is because I was right at the center of mass ridicule then. He said, I asked the staff what they thought of David Icke. And I said, look, just tell me honestly, just tell me honestly what you think. He said about 80% had sympathy for what you're saying, but none of them was saying it to anybody else. And that's what's happening to society in general. There is a vast number of people who don't want what's happening, who feel uneasy about what's happening, who don't want to have themselves intimidated into silence. But they think they're kind of one of the few. They're not. But because people are silent, they understandably think they are, because the noise is coming from the few who dominate the microphones and the cameras. So we need to speak our truth. And you look at all these kids, it's so sad, who, the suicide rates among young people are going up. And they're all going up significantly in the social media, smartphone era. And they're being psychologically broken by the abuse, by not being what others say they should be and not living up to what others say they should be. That can only happen when we allow ourselves to be self-defined by other people. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it, kids. Don't do it. Don't fall for it. It's a scam. We need to define ourselves. I am my unique self. I don't want to be like anyone else. I am a point of attention with an infinite state of consciousness, therefore an infinite state of perception. I am a unique expression of that consciousness, as you are and as everyone else is. I'm going to celebrate that uniqueness. I don't have to join the herd and be like everyone else because the herd tells me I must join the herd. I don't join herds, thank you very much. I define myself. Don't define yourself by the herd, because if you do, you become the herd. And when you become the herd, your unique self is gone, because your perceptions and what you are communicating as your perceptions are not yours anymore. They're the herd's perceptions. They're what whoever controls the herd, that's the point, is dictating those perceptions to be. And we are in an extraordinarily extreme situation now of the carrot and the stick. You get the carrot if you conform to the herd and you do what the herd demands. You get the stick if you don't. Well, I've taken the stick for 30 years, and I can tell you, it don't hurt. Unless you choose to believe it does, right? I've had historic levels of abuse. I've not been upset by it. I've not been offended by it, because I am my unique self. And if you're a unique self, then other people who are coming from a different point of view will think you're strange, they'll think you're crazy, they'll think you're dangerous. But that's for them to sort out. That's for them to work out. Not for me to work out, I'm just being me. And if you are celebrating your personal uniqueness, no matter what size you are, how tall you are, what you look like, what color you are, what religion you have, it doesn't matter. You're celebrating your unique self. Then whatever anyone tells you you must believe, what you must do, what you must think, however people are abusive towards you for what you look like or what you are, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, because you are in your own power of individual uniqueness. And that's what's being driven out of people, because it has to be. They have to get us into groups, into herds, ultimately in a global herd, so that we'll move as one unit. And here's an analogy. I stood one day and I saw this shepherd walking across this field towards a gate with his stick. One shepherd, one sheepdog. Enormous flock of sheep. And they're following the shepherd. And any of the sheep that were breaking out of the pack, the sheepdog sorted them out. And what did that represent? Fear. And they were following the shepherd, and they went through the gate and they went across to the farm. And I looked at it and I thought, that's humanity passing by. Because exactly the same happens, because we concede our uniqueness to it. I would say this, first of all, if you don't give in to fear, abuse and all that stuff, symbolized by the sheepdog, what's the sheepdog going to do? Rope, 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 rope. And? Rope, 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 rope. And? Where's the sheepdog's power? Right? And then, what if the sheep, following the shepherd, because they do every day, oh, this is life, this is what you do, you follow the shepherd. What if they said, I'm going to see what's over here? And another one says, I'm going to see what's over here. I'm fed up of following the shepherd and conforming to what I'm told to do and go where I'm going over here. The shepherd, symbolizing the elite, controlling the world, controlling society, what's he going to bloody do? He's standing there now with his stick and he's seeing sheep going off in all directions. He don't know where to start. Because his power was illusory. The power of this elite is illusory. The power this elite recycles back against us is the power we give to the elite every day. And so if people cease to cooperate with their own enslavement, by when the system says do this, I'm not doing it. You know, someone comes out of Downing Street or the White House and they say, we've had a discussion, this is what's going to happen. What if enough people say, we're not doing it? Not doing it. Where's their power? Their power is in our acquiescence to them, as the power of the shepherd is in the sheep's acquiescence to him and the intimidation of the fear of the sheepdog. The few cannot control the many unless the many cooperate with their own enslavement. We need to stop doing it, and when we do, it's over, kaput, finished. And that's why this cabal is so terrified of the communication of information that is going to alert humanity to its plight, because it knows that when humanity becomes aware of the game is over. And it can be over even in the latter stages of this enslavement agenda. It can still be over when we withdraw our acquiescence to it. And I say this to kids and anybody else. How long could you live without your smartphone? And then ask, what is an alcoholic? What, an alcoholic? Is someone addicted to alcohol? Yeah. Why is he addicted to alcohol? Because he can't stop drinking it. Yeah. But you can't put your phone down. And if you do, within a few minutes you pick it up again because you're addicted to it. So are you controlling that bit of technology in your hand, or is that controlling you? That's controlling you. So do you want your life controlled by a bit of technology? Do you want the rest of your life controlled by it? Or are you now going to go, I'm putting this down?
Is that the first step for most people?
Well, that's the first step. Put it down.
Put it down.
You see, if technology is going to be the servant rather than the governor, it has to serve the interests of humanity, and humanity does not have to serve it. We're in a situation now where humanity is serving technology. And it will be serving AI. Increasingly, it is serving AI in its algorithmic expression. I have a mobile phone of way back down, I think it's 3G, they call it, and it sits in a desk at my house for months on end, sometimes 6-7 months. If I'm in a situation where I need to communicate with someone, that I won't have any other form of communication where I am, I might have it with me. I'll communicate and I'll say, I'll be on a landline at this time, and the thing goes off and goes back in the drawer for another 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It serves me rarely when I'm in that situation. And you find there is very, very little that won't wait till you're on a landline. And you can have a proper conversation with someone without this burning your brain and without you constantly on it. Because what is happening, and this cabal knows this, for a very long time, indeed right up to recent times, science believed that once the brain was formed, that was it. That's how it stayed. Now they know it's very different through this thing they call brain placidity. Brain placidity means the brain is changing in the way it processes information and the neuron networks it creates to process information on the basis of information received. So what we've had in this very short time is the human brain bombarded with digital electrical stimulus that it's never experienced before. And there have been books written by scientists about this. It's changing the human brain. It's changing the way the brain processes information. And how we process information dictates our perception of reality. And kids are having their brains rewired. And you know, people talk about love. Well, and people think loving your children and wanting the best for your children is giving them things that they want. Well, where does most stimulus come from what children want? It comes from the system, it comes from adverts, it comes from peer pressure and all that stuff. So the loving thing to do, the caring thing to do for your child from that perception of love is to give them a mobile phone. And they'll love you for it. They'll like you for it. Oh, thank you, Mum. Thank you, Dad. Just what I wanted. The really loving thing is not to give them a mobile phone and to take their disappointment and to take often their anger. You don't care about me, because you care about them deeply, because you're not supporting them going down this road of technological control. So when people say there's nothing I can do, I'm just little me, first of all, you're not little me, that's just a perception of yourself. But there's endless things we can do. The question is, are we going to do them? And that answer to that question will decide if we end up in this technological dystopia or whether we don't.
Right.
And we better start making the choice quick, because it's moving fast.
What's next for you? I heard we got another book coming soon.
Yeah, I'm about a week finishing a book. I've got to tell you now, it will be possibly the most controversial book of modern times, possibly ever, given the nature of human society that we've been talking about.
Not just your most controversial book ever, the most controversial.
Oh, the most controversial book. Oh, yeah.
In all time.
They'll have to take to their beds, mate. They'll have to take to their beds and drink some broth, because, you know, I've used the analogy in the book that it's like standing in a lift, an elevator, and the doors are closing. And they're going to close unless you stick your arm through the door, and then they'll hit you and go out. We're at the point where the doors are closing, and someone's got to stick their arm through the door. Because if they don't, they're going to close. They're going to close in the very near future. So I've written a book that is symbolically the arm going through the door. And it's going to make me very unpopular with all the right people. I'm going to be very interested in the reaction. But basically, it's all the things that people are intimidated not to say, but can be supported with fact. And therefore, why aren't we saying them?
And why say them now for you?
Because the door's closing.
Okay.
Two things. A, because the door's closing. And B, because I've reached a point in my now coming up to 30 years of research where even more pennies have dropped. The kaleidoscope has moved again, and therefore I can write this book in absolute confidence that what I'm saying is true. And that's why I've been getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I've still been writing at 6 o'clock at night, day after day, because I've been so so caught up in this unfolding story that I've been putting together, because it explains the world and current events and recent events that puts them in a totally different context.
Is it going to be banned? What's going to happen to you?
Well, if there are not demands that it's banned, I'll be staggered. But so what? So what? You see, when people think about the consequences of speaking their truth, they are thinking in the short term of immediate cause and effect. If I say this, if I write this, these are the consequences I'm going to get. And they might not think the consequences are very pleasant, so they'll not say it or not write it. I'm looking at consequences over a longer period of time. See, what happens to me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? I'm a point of attention with an infinite awareness. Whatever happens to me, I'll just continue my journey of forever experiencing, exploring forever. You know, so what happens to me in the short term, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter.
You really mean that, don't you?
Yeah, I mean that, because that frees me to say what I believe to be right without thinking about consequences. I don't just not fear consequences, don't even think about them. Maybe I'm aware of them, but I don't think about, well, if I say this, what the consequence is. My criteria is, can I support this as being true? Yes, okay, I'm going to say it, I'm going to write it.
And we saw this 30 years ago on The Wogan Show. You spoke your truth.
And that's all you can do. But, you know, where I'm going with this is people look at the immediate cause and effect consequences. If I say I write this, these are the consequences. I'm looking at these consequences, not the consequences of what you say, the consequences of not saying it. Because the consequences of not saying it, of not putting that arm through the door, means that this is going to play out. And look your kids in the eye, look your grandchildren in the eye, and just think on the world they're going to live in. If people think it's bad now, if people think free speech is being deleted now, if people think dystopia is unfolding now, what's it going to be like for them? That drives me on in relation to my own children, my own grandchildren. What's it going to be like for them? And I'm not going to expose what's happening to head that off because someone might abuse me and try to ban my book. Are you having a laugh? Of course I'm going to do it. Because not doing it is unthinkable. And this is what we need people to do, not to think of short-term consequences, but to think of longer-term consequences, not only for themselves, but even more so for their kids and grandkids. The greatest gift that we can give our children and grandchildren is to head this off so they don't have to live in this world that's unfolding and being planned for them. And not to play a part in their preparation with these things of making them accept it. This is what, you know, when people say, what can I do? Endless things you can do. First of all, don't be intimidated into silence. Because once it goes silent, it's silent for good.
What's your obituary going to read? What are they going to say about David Icke when you're gone?
Doesn't matter. It matters as much of what they say about me when I've gone as what they're saying about me when I'm here. You tell me you tell me I'm a hero and I'm this and I'm that. Thanks. You tell me I'm some evil bloody racist and whatever you. Okay. You know, don't get caught in either. Don't get caught in the hero. Don't get caught in the villain. Just be your unique self. How you're seen externally doesn't matter. The truth matters. You know, doing what you believe to be right by everybody matters. The consequences you get for that don't matter. They don't matter at all. And, you know, if you really believe in what you're doing and you believe in what you're saying is coming, these things do not pass through your thought processes in the sense that there is no, what are the consequences of doing this? What are the consequences of doing that? The criteria is always, is it right? Is it true? Can I justify this? Can I support it? Have I crossed the line where I've got enough evidence to say, yes, this is happening? That's the criteria. Consequences, they'll take care of themselves. You know, 30 years ago, when I couldn't walk down any street in Britain without being laughed at, where going into a bar was, you know, uproar, where I would go and talk at university students' unions, masochistically, the height of the ridicule, and you know, have abuse shouted at me all night by the decision makers of tomorrow. People would have said, that Icke finished. Ike finished. Well, but if you keep going and you don't stop and defend yourself, you don't run away, you just keep being your unique self and doing what you believe to be right. If what you're saying has validity, eventually it will be shown to be so. And your life will change, as mine has, from what it used to be with all the ridicule and abuse everywhere.
It's changed how?
It's changed in the sense that now people are looking at what I'm saying and going, hold on a minute, this makes sense. Which you would never have thought. That night of the Wogan show, how many people would have said, one day, vast numbers of people are going to take this guy seriously. Why, you're having a laugh, mate. He's finished. My father said something to be very, very telling when I was a kid. He said to me, Dave, he said, because he called me Dave, like, because that's my name. He said, you're never finished in life until you admit that to yourself. Never. You sit down in a chair and say, I'm finished, you're finished. But until that point is reached, no matter what anyone says about you, it doesn't matter what situation we're in, you're never finished. There's always a tomorrow. There's always another day. And I've always remembered that. And I basically live by it. And there is another day. You know, kids who are being abused on social media and by their narcissistic friends who think that their life is over because of what people are saying about them. There's always tomorrow. The sun comes up tomorrow. It's another day. And that leads to another day and another day and another day. And eventually you're in a day that was nothing like the one you thought was forever. Nothing's forever. Unless you allow it to be forever by being the same person forever, and then you won't change. But there's always another day. And whatever they do to me, or whatever they say to me, however they want to silence me, I'll just keep on doing my thing and I'll work a way around it somehow. And there's always tomorrow. And there's always another day. And so however bad things are now, it's just an experience. There'll be another one along in a minute.
There's a point in the movie where these kids are writing on the beach the word freedom, and you get very emotional about this whole thing. This whole thing is emotional for you, right?
Well, it's emotional because I care about it, but I don't get emotional in my research and my writing. You have to be back from that. But I do get emotional, and that point in the film was extraordinary because, and I got partly emotional because of its extraordinary nature. When I started out on this journey, consciously anyway, the journey started when I arrived, but with hindsight, but consciously. My life became this synchronistic journey of coincidence where information would come to me and I'd meet people or I'd come across books or documents or personal experiences that were all like puzzle pieces being handed to me to put together. And these synchronicities they were almost confirmations. You know, when at the height of the ridicule, when everything seemed lost, these coincidences would keep happening. And they were like saying, come on, you're going in the right direction, keep going. And it was one of the motivations, because something was happening in my life, because there were so many coincidences. And when we were filming, we filmed in 4 countries across a long period of time, several months. And eventually they came to the Isle of Wight to film me at home and places that I love and where I go. And they decided, they were chatting to me, and I said, I came here as a kid and I used to stand on the pier at Ryde watching the steam trains go up and down. That's when I fell in love with the Isle of Wight. And they said, oh, we'll go there. And, oh, we won't go there now, we'll go later because we'll film somewhere else now. So, apparently it was all random timing, when we were going to go. So we end up at the end of the day, at this point on the pier, where I used to watch steam trains go past. They're electric trains now, obviously. And they're filming me and stuff. And then one of them said, hey, look at this. I think it was Jamie. Hey, look at this. And I walked across the other side of the pier and I looked down at the beach. And there was a mother and 2 children, like young teenagers. And they were writing, as people will see in the film, the word freedom, a massive word freedom, on the beach. And that was the beach when I used to watch steam trains, where I used to sit, and where we used to sit with my mother and father and my brother Paul. And there was freedom being written and on the beach. And the filming was all about, the whole film is about the freedom. And for that to happen, at that point of all points, when they could have written freedom on the beach any time, we could have gone there any time, but the two came together, was a very powerful moment for me. Because not only was it a sign of the times, here is people writing freedom in a beach. So you know, something's happening here, you know, people are beginning to become more aware that we need to defend it. But it was also at the very same time that we were there, same time they were filming. And I did get quite emotional, because I can see how the world could be. You know, there's people dying of diseases that are curable. There's people in poverty that don't need to be. There's people suffering that don't need to suffer. And there's all these things that are called unsurmountable problems. All these things that, you can't fix that, it's just the way the world is. But after 30 years of research, I know that it's not the way the world could be. It's the way the world is meant to be. It's manipulated to be like that. We have all these things, all these ills of the world, because they are made to happen. And if they're made to happen, other things can be done in terms of behavior that can stop them happening. But I did find that a very powerful moment, which brought a lot of things together, brought my life together in the last 30 years, really. And it also was indicative of this awakening that's happening, this realization that the world's not like it we're told it is, and the powers that are dictating the world and the direction of it are not the powers we think are happening. And I'll tell you one other thing while I remember, which is very relevant now with all the Brexit mess. The goal eventually, and they have a term for it, this cabal, they call it the post-democratic society. They have a goal of deleting democracy, as we call it, and the right of the people to choose their leaders. That's where they want this to go. And it's in their own writings that what they plan to do in the run-up to this is to get the population absolutely in despair and contempt for their political leaders. And we're seeing that around the world now. Because they want a situation where people are so contemptuous of so-called elected leaders that they become open to other people taking over the mantles of power, so long as they'll make things better than they are. And that process is happening. You're going to see more of it, the demonization of politicians. And the more self-centered, mendacious, lying, incompetent politicians you can bring to power, the more contempt the public will have and the more you'll get your outcome.
All part of the plan.
All part of the plan.
Are we going to make it, David?
Choice. Choice. Does Neo get out of the car and walk down the street in the rain? You've been down that road before, Neo. Or does he stay in the car and make a different choice? That is the choice we have. People have the choice every day. Do I speak out or do I not? And I tell you this from experience, when you speak out, you'll find that there are others around you never believed, never thought, who support what you're saying. And the more that people speak out, the more confidence other people have to speak out. And stop looking up. Stop looking up. You know that Val Doonican song, walk tall, look straight, and look the world right in the eye. That's what my mama told me when I was about knee high. She said, son, be a proud man and hold your head up high. Walk tall, walk straight, and look the world right in the eye. We need to stop looking up. When things are happening that we don't like, instead of going, what are they going to do about it? Which is giving the power there. What am I going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? That's the level where problems are sorted out. Not there, here and here. And there's billions of us. Why can't we get together and do it ourselves? Of course we can. But we're so used to giving our power away and looking up. What are they going to do about it, them politicians? Instead of doing it for ourselves, that we give our power away all the time. We need to take it back. Make them irrelevant. Make them irrelevant, because they are really, but make them really irrelevant by doing things ourselves instead of demanding that they do them.
David, I very much appreciate the things that you do. A lot of people know you for a lot of different things, the isms, the this and the that. And before I got you in here about a year and a half ago, that's all I kind of knew.
Right.
I heard this, and he said, she said, this is this. But when you're in that chair, you're trying to get us to wake up and be ourselves.
Yeah.
And to take responsibility and ask questions and wake up. And this is a great message. You know, this is an important message.
Have you noticed something also?
What's that?
The word wake has been hijacked. They call it woke. You know that? That progressive word?
Yes.
Are you woke? Am I woke? What do you study at university? English grammar. Oh, right, okay. Are you woke? By what? But are you woke? It means, are you into political correctness and all this stuff? That's not woke. That's not awake. That's solid gold asleep. We need to awaken. What does that mean? What does awaken mean? It means to delete the programs of perception of self and the world that we've allowed ourselves to be perceptually controlled and programmed by. That point of consciousness is already awake. What stops us being as awake in our human perceptions and actions as our consciousness is awake are the perceptual programs, the onion skins that dictate our perceptions while we're in this reality. And awakening is simply removing the programs. You know, you don't have to seek enlightenment. We are enlightened. We are enlightened. We're consciousness. We're enlightened consciousness of what we are. It's not about seeking it. Don't seek what you already are. Remove what's keeping you from that conscious connection with what you are, which is the programs. And just get a blank sheet of paper, symbolically or literally, and say, my perceptions getting on that piece of paper are now going to be dictated by me. They're going to be dictated not what I'm told to think, not what I'm told is, but what I genuinely think myself, what I feel is right, what I've researched and believe is accurate. They're my perceptions. Rather than taking your perceptions, as we used to say years ago, off the peg, and just take them wholesale. No. Become a unique point of observation. And, you know, you see this groupthink where you have to think everything the group believes. If there's 10 things the group believes, you can't believe 6 of them and not believe 4, or you're an outcast. You've got to believe all of them. And you show me any group, any people, and they'll be saying some things that you will agree with and some things you won't agree with. Pick them off individually. That makes sense. The same person says something else. No, that doesn't make sense. So I'll take that and I'll leave that, rather than taking wholesale belief systems and they become you. You know, we've got to disconnect from the herd, because the herd mentality is how the few control the many. It's how the shepherd controls the sheep. And when we break away from the herd mentality, we break away from control. Because a handful of people can't control 7.7 billion individuals, or even a fraction of that. And individuals is what we need to be. Collectively supporting each other, yes, but not being a group, being an individual, unique point of observation. And what a wonderful world that would be. What a wonderful world where we celebrate diversity. This is the great, and another great of the list of ironies, is that those that spout about diversity are destroying it. You know, I believe in diversity, you can't say that, but me saying that is diversity, right? It's another opinion. Oh no, but that's not the right diversity. And what a wonderful, diverse society you'd have if people brought to the table their own unique spin on everything, their own unique creativity and way of doing things and way of seeing things, how the world and humanity would move on in that state, instead of being confined to this narrow band of perception that we're allowed to have and nothing beyond it. Got to stop. And when it does, the world will change massively for the better.
You really care about humanity, don't you? It's very important to you.
I care about how the world could be compared with how it is. There's something, when you look at suffering, you see it in a certain way if you convince yourself there's nothing we can do about it. That's the way the world is. That's bad enough. But when I see suffering, I see how it could be. I see that it doesn't have to be. Because when you take someone suffering from whatever hunger, whatever war, and you chart back the sequence, you come to the same people who are making it happen. If we remove control there, all that consequence of that disappears. The world could change so fast for the better. It really could, because the world that we call the world and what happens in the world is simply a collection of, it's the collective state of human consciousness. When human consciousness changes, the world it manifests must change. If we care about each other and love each other, we live in a caring, loving world. If we hate or have conflict with each other, we live in a world of conflict and hatred. The world we live in is just the manifestation of human choice made by consciousness. If we give our power away, what are they going to do about it? Then we live in a world controlled by a few people. If we make a different choice and take the power back, then we live in a world which a few people cannot control, because there's too many points of decision making and too many points of choice. And that's another thing, you know. What is freedom? What is freedom? On one level, on one massive level, freedom is the ability to make choices. The more choices you can freely make, the more freedom you have. The fewer choices you have, the less freedom you have. And what this whole conspiracy is about is squeezing human choice. And as they squeeze human choice, even the choice of what opinion you can have now, then they're squeezing human freedom. Because choice and freedom are interconnected. They are expressions of each other. And we need to surely not concede our right to make choices, not least in what we say and what we believe. And the more choices we insist on having, the more freedom starts to manifest.
The movie is Renegade.
Renegade.
It's going to be premiering in London, Manchester, New York, Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, end of this month, towards the end of this month, there's going to be a premiere in Manchester and a premiere in London. The details are on davidicke.com. I'm going to attend all of them.
I'll be the one in London too.
Oh yeah, it'd be great. Yeah, take questions afterwards. And then I'm going to Los Angeles and New York. We're going to do the same there, and that's shortly after. So it's only in a few weeks' time. And I'll be interested to see how it's received, because the whole idea is to bring more and more people into seeing that the world's not like they thought it was. Because I know from my experience that once people see that one thing's not like they thought it was, then the dominoes start to fall. Well, what else have I been thinking that's not true? And the whole thing starts to motor. And it's a great time. It's a great time of challenge because of what's happening. But it's a great time of optimism, because if there wasn't an awakening going on outside the public arena that we see, then we really would be up the Swanee without one of them. Mm. But it is happening. So we have a chance, and we have to keep going and not give up on it. Because if we do, we're giving up on freedom, and what's the point of that?
I'm glad we're finishing on that note of optimism, and I'm glad we went a little dark there, because it's important that people understand how serious these conditions are, because it's hard for me to listen to a lot of that stuff. I've got kids, young kids, and they've got to live in this world. Congratulations on the movie. I very much enjoyed it. I think it's incredible that you kind of let go of creative control over it, because someone else made it, and they made a great kind of an introduction to David Icke, and I think it's going to be powerful for
That was the point. I had nothing to do with the editing. When I saw it, it was finished. And that was good, because it was done by people that were not big time into the information. That's very important.
I think people are going to love it. I'm looking forward to the next book. I'm looking forward to getting an early copy, I hope.
I'm looking forward to the next book. I'm not sure some people are going to be, though, but I am. Good.
Well, keep doing what you're doing. You're looking amazing. You look fit and strong. I know you work hard, so please try to take care of yourself.
No problem.
So you can keep the message up. We're always here when you want to stop by for a conversation. Again, really appreciate what you do, the sacrifice you put out there, and just trying to get these ideas into people's minds. It's super important. Let's try to keep you on these platforms and keep talking about this. And just really appreciate you, David. So
it's always a pleasure to talk to you, mate.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thanks. Right. Well, that was great. I loved it.
Enjoyed it.
We covered some.
At London Real, we believe that individual transformation can change the world. Join us and start your journey today.